enemy of the almighty food chain. Birds eat bugs, lions eat antelope, crocodiles eat everything, and people eat apple pie. What happens when you give that apple pie the power to fight back? That's when you get Appletun, who will fight off bug-type Pokemon who try to eat it. But what about the other 1,024 Pokemon? These sunlight absorbers that are our grass types, the soul-sucking ghosts, the dream-eating Tepirs, and even the blood-drinking bats. Where does every single Pokemon fit in our food chain? Because saying every Pokemon eats berries is completely wrong, as told by the Dex entries. So after spending over a year studying the intricate ecology of entire regions in the Pokemon world, scouring every single one route by route, I can finally bring to you the complete Pokemon food chain! Howdy there, I'm Krillek, and this has been a long time coming. But in order for us to dive in, I need to rapidly explain how this works. My intention is to make this as realistic as possible while taking the information of the Pokemon world first and foremost. What does this mean, you ask? Well, the Rafflesia or corpse flower in the real world absorbs nutrients from other plants and is not carnivorous. Meanwhile, Gloom and Vileplume actually eat insects as their primary diet. So we can't just trust the Pokemon world to match our real world in terms of diets at all. And if Pokemon tells us it's a carnivore, then it is a carnivore. But in cases such as Chimecho, who directly states that it is omnivorous and hunts for prey in its Pokédex entry, that thing is basically a wind chime, so what does it eat? Well, I took the Pokemon, found any inspirations it had, looked at every route that these Pokemon occur on, and see how its presence on that route, or not on a other route, affects the evolution of other Pokemon. This is because evolution means that a Pokemon is either feeling pressured by another Pokemon, or has a lot of excess food, allowing the Pokemon to evolve. And in the case of Chimecho, well, you'll just have to watch the video in order to find out what it's eating, because I did figure it out. Finally, you will also notice that I didn't just have them grouped within their food chains. Every single Pokemon is put into smaller subsections that relatively represent their egg groups, again, for the most part. There are plenty of exceptions, but this allows us to understand them better visually, because our human brain likes to have categories and separation. And the closer a Pokemon is to the center, typically, it will also mean that the Pokemon is less likely to be eaten. This could be because of its straight up power, where it is found, where it's, maybe it's super solitary, you name it. So again, we're about to jump right in with all of this in mind. But remember, Pokemon info is king, directly from the Pokédex or the world itself. From there, if it doesn't state a diet, then we look at its inspirations, which we will use to support what the diets of these Pokemon are with real life evidence and by looking at their habitats. And yes, along the way, I will be sure to share plenty of evidence and some fun facts with real science. Now, I will also say you can download the diagram yourself to follow along, but I will also have parts of it on screen when applicable. So let's begin. We're gonna begin with the Detrivores, the cleaners of the Pokemon world. These are the creatures that eat dead organic material. This is where you would expect vultures, many different kinds of insects, and technically mushrooms, even though those are actually considered decomposers. We can literally start anywhere on the circle, so why don't we just begin with Trubbish and work our way around. With Trubbish and Garbodor, it is pretty clearly stated that they prefer unsanitary places such as garbage dumps, where it finds trash and other rotten stuff such as moldy apples for food. And eventually, once it's eaten enough, the trash overflows and it bursts open to evolve into Garbodor. Because fun fact, not every Pokemon actually evolves by leveling up. It's also important to note that these Pokemon are hunted down and eaten by the muck line. Garbodor prefers to live in unsanitary places such as garbodumps, where it devours garbage in order to grow larger. Consuming garbage also allows Garbodor to create poisons in its body, the type of which depends on the kind of garbage eaten. And it is made very clear that Garbodor, and many other Pokemon for that matter, have defensive qualities and will use their abilities to fight and weaken foes, but not eat them. In all fairness, any creature in the real world will eat any creature if it had no choice. And, I mean, we've had documented evidence of a tortoise that has hunted down a baby bird which was completely out of the norm, all because the tortoise absolutely needed those nutrients. In addition, we cannot trust the idea of sharp fangs and front-facing eyes means that it is a predator. This means that this goes for the real-life world as well, as we have what is called, what I like to call at least, the vampire deer. It has front-facing eyes, long sharp teeth, and yet it is known to be an herbivore. In fact, those fangs are supposed to be used to help it dig up roots. Remember all of this as we continue to talk about Pokemon later on, as I don't want to see a single person in the comments stating that Clefairy is a demon from space that eats Pokemon, just because it has front-facing eyes and sharp teeth. But moving forward, we have Wimpod, who is literally called nature's cleaner Pokemon, and is even shown just eating whatever comes its way. It specifically stated Wimpod will eat and store anything, including garbage from the sea. This habit makes them highly valued as cleaners. And I do love me some Wimpod, one of the 3 best bug evolutionary lines in all of Pokemon. And you wouldn't expect it, but Dwebble and Crustle are also nature's cleaners, but they keep our sandy deserts all nice and healthy. They don't have any diet stated, but according to Stanford University, hermit crabs are widespread Detrivores? Is that how I've been messing up that word so often? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. For a long time, I was told Detrivores is not a word. Anywho, hermit crabs are widespread Detrivores in intertidal ecosystems. And I've also seen them being described as omnivorous Detrivores, meaning that they will literally eat anything that comes their way that is decomposing or garbage or whatever in general, because yes, even our Detrivores do have a preference. Okay, I just found out because I couldn't let it go. Detritivore and Detrivore are both correct. So that makes me feel better after all these years. Now, we can see the Detrivore diet of these Pokemon exemplified in Unova, as Dwebble doesn't seem to affect other Pokemon and just isn't causing any pressure. Though I will admit it might be eating some Maractus seeds on occasion whenever it finds them lying around. This is because Maractus' seeds are incredibly important for the desert ecosystem, which is stated very directly by its Pokédex. The Grubbin line is a little interesting and can be argued to have more going on once it reaches Vikavolt. It is directly stated with Grubbin, it uses its jaw as a weapon, a tool for burrowing, and for extracting sap from trees. And normally I would have just thrown that in with the Nectarivores, but Grubbin is more than likely eating some of the decomposed matter within soil, especially once it reaches Charjabug, who is stated is often found half buried in earth or leaves, munching on large quantities of humus. And humus is the dark organic matter in soil that is formed by the decomposition of plants and animal matter. So yeah, it had to learn how to eat that somehow, which is very interesting because this species of Pokemon is communal in some capacity, as shown with Vikavolt. Now, Vikavolt will carry Charjabug around for an extra battery of energy, but it will release them when things get a little bit too crazy in aerial combat. In addition, Vikavolt states no diet, and while it does attack bird Pokemon, there's nothing stating that it eats them. This is likely a form of revenge, as it is to also protect its buggy brethren. As such, I am sure Vikavolt continues to eat that good decomposing material, showing Charjabug and Grubbin where the best soil is, and then proceeds to zap more bird Pokemon into the ground in order to replenish the soil's nutrients. And that is ecology, baby. Onward, we have Relor's line, and honestly, they have no diet stated, and they say that those balls that they're rolling around are mud balls, but let's be real. We all know that these are like a weird mix of dung beetle and scarab beetle mixed together. After all, that's why it reaches immortality in its evolution. But this also lines up perfectly with real dung beetles, as they will lay their eggs in a dung ball so their young have a fresh meal as soon as they're born. Feels wrong to say fresh when talking about fecal matter, but we'll roll with it. Either way, instead of a bunch of little eggs, we get one big egg, and Rabska gets to restart its life over and over again. Moving forward, Pokemon doesn't really separate fungi from other regular plants, which fungi aren't plants for clarification, but I do make that separation because I need to keep some level of sanity. So just be prepared for that going forward if you see that representation or that separation. For now, though, we only have the Morlul and Shroomish lines, which are fungi. Morlo likes dark, damp areas such as dense jungles, but changes locations every night to avoid depriving the plants in any one area of too many nutrients. In addition, other Pokemon find the caps of Morlo to be a delicious treat, though none are specifically stated. Meanwhile, with Shiinotic, we have a very interesting case of the Pokédex making things seem scarier than it actually is, because it does directly state when its prey succumb to sleep, this Pokemon feeds on them by sucking on their energy. But as shown in the anime, it does not do this for its own energy. In fact, it doesn't need to. It does it because it needs to either replace the energy that a Pokemon took from the area around it, in which case maybe they were taking too much, they were causing damage to the environment, you name it, or a tree is dying, as shown in the episode in which they starred in, as Ash could literally just eat food, replenish his energy, and the Morlo kept taking the energy from him to restore plant life in the area and restore their health. As such, this is one of the few cases in which the quote-unquote prey is stated, but it's not actually preying on anything. It's more like targeting someone through vigilante justice, but if you truly believe otherwise, feel free to throw it into a category that we'll discuss later. Instead, we shall now move on to Shroomish. During the day, it hides under fallen leaves in the shade. It eats composted soil in forests, which is made up of fallen, rotten leaves. And Breloom upgrades a little bit as it feeds on decomposing trees and plants. I will say it is a little funny that it sprays spores on its enemies in order to incapacitate them, because that means there's a very good chance that if it did not knock out but actually kill another creature, that the creature will eventually become a home for Shroomish to grow from. And because of the visual that puts in my head, it freaks me out a little bit. Like botflies. But let's move on to a Pokemon most people would not expect to be a Detrivore, Dratini, who live near or in bodies of water with a rapid flow, such as the pools at the bottom of waterfalls. It lives a quiet life underwater, eating any food that sinks down to the bottom. And that is as clear as it gets when you think of bottom feeders and Detrivores all together. But don't worry, we have a different story with its evolutions, who we will talk about way later. Meanwhile, Pyukumuku was another interesting case in Alola. It states it will eat all the food in the area and then just die because it likes the area it is in too much to move. It's the equivalent of, I'm too comfy in my bed, I guess I'll just starve. But it's never explained what Pyukumuku actually eats, and it is a creature that just kind of exists on beaches and in shallow water without any issue, unless it dehydrates. Now, it is a sea bunny, but it is primarily a sea cucumber, and it even has the purify ability, which would likely mean that it is a filter feeder. Though this still doesn't exactly explain what it is eating or how it is running out of food, unless it is living in safe environments in which there is less activity, meaning less food to filter from the water. Thanks to NOAA, National Ocean Service, most sea cucumbers are scavengers, moving along the sea floor and feeding on tiny particles of algae or microscopic marine animals collected with tube feet that surround their mouths. The particles they grind down to smaller pieces are further broken down by bacteria and become part of the ocean's nutrient cycle. These creatures, by the way, also expel their internal organs in order to make would-be predators run away, quite literally the same as how Pyukumuku does. In other words, based on this information, we can claim that Pyukumuku would be another Detrivore. Magikarp and Feebas are both creatures that are considered some of the lowest on the food chain, well, if not literally the bottom, while also being bottom feeders that can survive in literally any environment whatsoever. I mean, Magikarp can even literally survive in space. They don't fight outside of trying to fish slap someone in self-defense, but even that is incredibly rare. So it's fairly easy to say, with their inspirations and their habits as Pokemon, and where we know they exist in the Totem of Power, that they are Detrivores. And in our little amorphous group, we have the entire Grimer line and its Alolan forms. This one you are likely most aware of, as considering they are born from waste hit by moonlight. Not even joking about that, but we'll talk about moonlight later. They just continue to live by simply eating more waste, garbage, chemicals, pretty much anything that should not be edible and has toxins or bacteria because their bodies are so full of bacteria that if they run out of bacteria, they just kind of die. They were even brought to Alola to help with cleanup efforts, and that's how they became their oily Alolan form. And to cap out our Detrivores, we simply have the Toxo line, who drink up polluted water and turn that into energy and electricity. Nice and simple, but something that should be kept in mind is that not every single Pokemon that generates energy through photosynthesis or chemical means is a Pokemon that is using that energy for their life or metabolism. Some Pokemon use their energy to simply fuel their attacks and not their stomach. And before we continue, I just want to say, thank you so much for watching. If you're enjoying this so far, please make sure that you do subscribe. If you have any arguments for or against, or want to share a fun fact about plants, animals, fungi, literally anything at all, because I'm one person and I can't share everything, share it in the comments below. I like to read every single comment, even if I don't respond to them all, and commenting and watch hours are the #1 way to freely help a channel grow. If you are enjoying this so much that you want to support the channel and deep research that follows science, real life science like this, then consider becoming a member of the channel for as little as $3 a month. You get behind the scenes content, you get videos early, and you get your name shouted out at the end of every single video. With that then, once again, thank you so much for watching, and on with the video. Welcome to the Nectarivores section. If I say Nectarivores, bear with me. But it's a pretty small section all in all, but that's okay. Our friends here stick to nectar as their primary source of food, but I am also going to let you know that Pokemon that eat honey or sap have also been included here. We'll begin with a few Pokemon that go relatively against their real-life counterparts, and that would be Oricorio, Ladybug, and Heracross. Honey creepers, which are what Oricorio is, are mostly omnivores, their diets consisting of nectar, insects, and fruit. But after digging through Alola and Oricorio information, it seems like it doesn't actually attack unless defending itself or its flowers. It even seems to exist in some pretty sparse routes all in all, where it can exist peacefully with other Pokemon that will join them in their fields. And I mean, come on, their forms literally change from the sap that they drink. So it feels like that would be pretty straightforward. This can go even further, as Senzu Oricorio's purple flower habitat even attracts Mischievous to its location in Alola, as it does call upon the power of ghosts to help it fight. So, Oricorio is a Nectarivore. Following up with Ladybug, who is another outlier to what normal creatures typically do, or at least minor outliers in this capacity, because lady beetles in general may eat nectar, but they of course will also eat plenty of aphids, small insects, pollen, and plants, or a mixture of said amounts or select amounts. But with Ladybug here, it is stated in the Pokemon the Series Gold and Silver episode The Whistle Stop, Ladybug is shown to serve a role in pollinating fruit-producing plants and is usually instructed to do so by means of a special whistle. They're also too timid and afraid to move alone, and overall seem to not be hunting any Pokemon whatsoever. Its evolution is even noted to be incredibly weak and needing a flurry of punches in order to defend itself. And speaking of letting in, it's not in this section and actually follows a different diet, though that diet is still not one that involves the consumption of other creatures. As such, it is safe to say that Ladybug is here in Nectarivores, though I guess you could call it an herbivore. Heracross just eats nectar and sap, and this is reinforced multiple times through Pokédex entries. A real-life Hercules beetle will eat rotting fruits and wood, sap, and leaves. Also, they don't lift 500 times their own weight. Sorry to burst that bubble, but that was a misconception because they were applying physics across different species without actually testing what it could do. Nowadays, it is tested and true that they can lift a still impressive maximum 20 pounds on the upper end. At least, that's as far as we've seen them lift. No one's taught them real bodybuilding techniques. Next in our circle, though, is Cutiefly and Ribombee, or Ribbonbee if you want to say it how, a normal person should say it, both being some incredibly important pollinators within the Alola region. In fact, they are so vital in pollinating that Cutiefly has adapted an ability to sense the auras of flowers when they bloom, making it easier to detect them. The only downside is that humans with strong emotions will also glow in the same manner, which has some really interesting connotations that I won't get into here. Ribombee does take it the extra step and even create something called pollen puffs, a nutritious and energy revitalizing puff of pollen that it even offers to humans in order to cheer people up and make them feel better. Gotta make that into its own cereal, you know, pollen puffs. And I gotta say, if this adorable little goober ever did that to me in real life, we'd have some cured depression. These Pokemon are also based on the bee fly, which it is the spitting image of. They're also mostly sustaining themselves on pollen and nectar while being important pollinators in the real world. So they're incredibly similar, though their children are parasites to other insects, so that's a little spooky. On our line of pollinators, we add Combee, who is, of course, a bee that pollinates the flowers of the Pokemon world happily. It's also consuming pollen, but may even eat some of its own honey. They're bees after all, so this is no real surprise. The only surprise is that they don't actually have a hive. They are the hive. So when a Pokemon comes in and states that it is attacking them for honey or is trying to take honey from them, it gets a little awkward. One of these Pokemon that will steal honey or nectar from Combee or other Pokemon is Mothim. You know, the forgotten male evolution of Burmy. It's a little funny because even in the world of Pokemon, they consider it a Nectarivore, but they never see it in flower fields. Instead, it just flies on over to Combee hives and steals directly from them. Whether they actually get away with their crime is a whole other story. From moths to butterflies, starting with Beautyfly, who, I will admit, does state Beautyfly has a long and curled black proboscis that it uses to gather pollen and nectar, its favorite food, from flowers. Its diet also includes water, fruit juices, and bodily fluids from its prey, all of which it sucks up with its proboscis. Now, the idea of prey and Beautyfly is a strange one that is either a mistake or one of our incredibly special cases. This goes back to the idea of the tortoise eating the, baby bird because it was desperate for food. Alternatively, though, it could be referencing the idea of butterflies, amongst many other bugs, draining a cadaver of fluids rich with nutrients that they need. Because in Pokemon, the only thing that they don't seem to eat is other decomposing Pokemon. Which, yeah, it's originally a kids or is a kids game and show. So, yeah, of course you wouldn't want to talk about Pokemon cadavers. Even our mushroom Pokemon aren't said to do so. So, with this, I would like to keep Beautyfly here in our Nectarivores, considering the idea that it is likely just drinking in fluid for those needed nutrients. Our final Pokemon in this section is pretty straightforward and easy with Butterfree, who can use its sensitive antenna to detect the odors of blooming flowers 6 miles or up to 10 kilometers from its nest in search of nectar, which it carries with the hairs of its legs. Sometimes it has territorial disputes with Cutiefly over fields of flowers. It also consumes sap from trees pierced by Heracross, as seen in the Pokemon the Series episode, A Sappy Ending. We're gonna cha-cha slide our way all over to the right end of the diagram because I'm not ready to tackle the mess that are the massive groups just yet. Plus, it makes the most sense to talk about more Pokemon that don't technically consume other creatures as we talk about the group that I am personally naming the Somnophores, named after somnium, which is dream in Latin. I believe actually it's more of a verb of to dream, but I'm not a linguist, and Somnophores aren't real anyway. But here in the Somnivores section, you're gonna find that we finally have legendary Pokemon to talk about. Any and all legendaries or mythicals do not actually have age groups that we know of, so I place them towards the center, as they are typically considered creatures that would be least likely to be eaten. After all, the majority of them are incredibly powerful creatures beyond imagination, or are so incredibly rare that other Pokemon wouldn't hunt them or know to hunt them. They're kind of like an invasive species if you think about it that way. Either way, we'll always save the center, which will be called the special Pokemon, for last. I also had decided that since dreams are often associated with emotions, that any creatures that consume emotions for energy belong here. And the strangest of them all is Ludicolo, as it becomes more powerful when it hears festive music and will appear near laughing children on hikes. The reason is due to the structures in Ludicolo's body that can produce energy when hit by sound waves with a cheerful rhythm. as it becomes more energetic and active, it will break into dance. I can feel myself doing a little bit of a cha-cha here as I'm talking about it. This allows Ludicolo to face enemies without fear. It can't be stated much clearer than that. Ludicolo gains energy through festive music. Happy and lively music, in other words. Honestly, a number of Pokemon that evolve through evolution zones, I will note, seem to have their behaviors and diets change. I might need to look into that for another video, but we'll talk about them briefly here and there during this one when they come up. Impidimp states that they try to be as much of a nuisance as possible in order to feed on the negative emotions that are created by the people that they bother. And of course, they're creepy and siphon the energy through their victims' noses, which that's how Drowsy functions, interestingly enough. And Impidimp is partially in the human-like egg group with them, so we may have some biological relations there. Its evolutions state no change in diet, just that Morgrem is underhanded in fighting opponents, and Grimmsnarl can overwhelm a Machamp since it uses all of that hair-like muscle fibers, which makes it a pretty baller Pokemon, but safe to assume that it is still a Somnivore. Shuppet is a adorable little Teru Bozu that actively consumes negative emotions. All to the point where if there are a number of them that gather under a house, it is said that you should just steer clear of it because there's a lot of bad things going on there. But Shuppet can eat negative emotions while you are awake or asleep. And in doing so, you will actually feel completely better as those negative feelings are taken away. And moving over slightly, we have the Mischievous line and our first Paradox Pokemon, which I'll typically consider with the special Pokemon, but this is a special case. Because with Mischievous, it is the only one of these Pokemon to state that it does scare other creatures and then consumes their fear for energy. So maybe just throw a bunch of them into a fun haunted house and just let them consume. Our other two, Mismagius and Fluttermane, don't state a diet, but we have a little bit of information because witches garnered a lot of fear, and a lot of people fear being cursed by this Pokemon. Yet at the same time, Mismagius is also seen as a Pokemon that can help you find love by casting a spell of love. So we could say that they're mostly harmless, and due to their negative appearance or the negative connotation attached to witches, they feed rather passively on fear rather than trying to jump scare you like some sort of Five Nights at Freddy's creature. And in regards to Fluttermane, Paradox Pokemon can be considered close enough in biological relation to our modern day equivalents that it is safe to assume that if there was a Fluttermane in our timeline, that it would be basically exactly the same in its comparison to the modern day counterpart. What does that mean? Long story short, Fluttermane may have been a bit more aggressive and scarier in its efforts to create fear for it to consume. I state all this because a paradox for our Paradox Pokemon is described as a seemingly absurd or self-contradictory statement or proposition that when investigated or explained may prove to be well-founded or true, meaning our Paradox Pokemon are real despite how strange they may be. So we can quite simply state that, again, there was a Fluttermane that existed in our timeline, even if the Fluttermane or other Paradox Pokemon we are aware of are not biologically related to the ones that we have in our timeline. Scarlet and Violet really brought in alternate timelines full force, and it confused a lot of people. I'll do a video on it eventually. Straddling the line of amorphous and human-like egg groups, there is the Ralts line, which I didn't expect to find there. The most important clue to realizing that they are Somnophores is that Ralts is stated to increase its body temperature when it feels happy feelings, which it can sense and read with its horn from other creatures. Now, I would have originally chalked this up as being an adorable little thing that is just the cozy sharing of emotions between people, but it's not. This is the group of Pokemon that are called the Emotion Pokemon, especially once we get to Mega Gardevoir in particular, who opens its heart and unlocks its full powers. In addition, your body does warm up when you metabolize food, even if it is just a little bit. As such, with this information, I would like to attribute this Pokemon with the category of Somnovore. I'm messing up my own word. You likely already know that the Drowsy duo and Muna duo are not only eating Dream Mist, but are also related to each other, as said by Pokemon directly, pretty clear Somnivores. And before we get to our traditionally legendary Pokemon, we have Nihilivores and the Beast of Ruin, which, follow me on this one, it's gonna be interesting, because starting with Nihiligo, it is directly stated that Nihiligo's most distinctive feature is its parasitic capability. When Nihiligo latches onto a host's head, it does not manipulate its actions directly. Instead, it awakens the host's own capabilities and boosts them to an extreme extent in order to protect itself. It injects the host with a sort of neurotoxin to achieve this effect. This neurotoxin of Nihiligo's is incredibly stimulating and inspires feelings of extreme excitement and a lack of inhibition in its host. Anything or anyone that Nihiligo latches onto will have its native skills forcibly activated to their fullest extent and will then act as it naturally desires to. Pokemon Adventures, the manga, also elaborates upon Nihiligo's neurotoxin, explaining that its venom turns their negative emotions into happiness and pleasure. It's also said that Nihiligo mostly feed on those who feel intense worry or anxiety. They're also noted that it is a creature that is not inherently hostile and does feel emotions. It even lived with Moan, the husband of Lusamine and the father of both Gladion and Lily, for a long time, rather than attaching to him and killing him, possibly even over the course of months, if not years. Through this, we can understand Nihiligo is most likely very similar to Mischievous in its feeding habits, except instead of scaring you, it makes your anxiety and depression worse. And by transforming that, it can feed upon it, instilling you with more and more, creating an endless cycle of food, which is exactly what it was doing to Lusamine long before they fused together, which explains her actions. With the Treasures of Calamity, which is such a better name for them, which comes from their direct translation, while I will admit that Wo-Chen can take life from the plant life around it for energy, I think that is just for power, not what actually keeps it alive. In fact, all four of our treasures here are not their bodies, but rather beads, tablets, swords, and a straight up sacrificial bowl. These four creatures were given life from the negative emotions that their objects were exposed to, filling them with negative energy that gave them life. And honestly, their real life inspirations are fairly dark. I won't talk about them here, but considering they are all fueled by the horrors of mankind, I would like to propose that they continue to consume these negative emotions that exist in order to continue living. And maybe, if they weren't sealed away, they would only become more powerful. But let's move on. At the center, we have both Darkrai and Cresselia. They are counterparts to each other, two sides of the same coin, the lunar moon and the new moon, and with understanding that Darkrai does trap people within nightmares, as stated, Darkrai possibly feeds off dreams, characterized by its association with never-ending nightmares. And while it does put people to sleep primarily as a self-defense tactic to ensure people don't hunt it down or it's not bothered, it really does seem to be gaining energy from others' nightmares. With this in mind, if this is true, then Cresselia, who is representative of dreams and is able to release creatures from Darkrai's never-ending nightmares, likely consumes energy from dreams. Honestly, Cresselia has a lot of mystery around her, but I feel that it's safe to say that it consumes the positive energy created by dreams. This would also be pretty fitting considering we have a number of Pokemon that do eat dreams, and they could have some level of relation or connected ancestry to Cresselia. Either way, we have now closed out the Somnophores and we can move on. Here comes a big section with Nihilivores, which I derive from Nihilum, meaning nothing or the absence of anything. I also realized this may have had some influence on Nihiligo's name, Nihiligo, which might just break down to absence of ego. Take that as you will, but this category is made up of every Pokemon that does not eat, or at least does not need to derive energy in any way at all. Many cocoon Pokemon exist here, since they literally cannot eat and as such do not eat. And so we might as well just start with those Pokemon in the insect section. Metapod, Kakuna, Silcoon, Cascoon, and Pupitar. But then we have two moths, and technically Genesect, since it used to be a normal Pokemon, but it's a mythical and people confuse it for a legendary, or it's a legend, whatever. It's got weird stuff going on. Genesect is pretty simple considering it is a cyborg or android Pokemon revived by Team Plasma. But why are moths and our little paradox moth to add in there? Well, the fun thing about frost moth, Volcarona, and slitherwing is that they are designed after the snow swallowtail for frost moth and the atlas or cecropia moth for our other two, with some additional inspirations, of course. But frost moth already breaks the norm by Snom, its pre-evolution, eating snow and ice. But with our other inspirations, they flat out do not eat in real life to my knowledge. Or at least a good chunk of them don't. This is because a large number of insects, including some moths, in fact do not eat. They simply just subsist on the amount of food that they gorged on during their life before becoming a cocoon. This would explain even how Volcarona inside Unova, where it's not even actually native to, by the way, and the one that we found deep underground within the ruins is all alone and somehow managed to survive all these years, all these thousands of years. It lived for so long because it doesn't need to eat, and it isn't consuming heat as it is seen as a source of heat and light, as that's why it was kind of down there, because it also provided the warmth of the sun. Or at least that is until it burns up all the oxygen in the room, and I'm pretty sure that's why we have Yamask in that little underground area there. But moving on, we have an amorphous group of Pokemon. None of them are stated to eat anything at all, likely just subsisting on their own existence. But some strange and fun examples here are Slugma's who just replenishes their body by dipping themselves into magma, but do not eat, and they're inspired by the scaly-foot gastropod, otherwise known as the volcano snail. It is a pretty dope looking snail all in all that does not eat at all because the bacteria inside of its body just kind of does all the work for it, which don't ask me the science on that. But to follow this, Banette, and yes, we get a lot of ghosts that are amorphous group, it kind of makes sense, but Banette is full of cursed energy and isn't even allowed to open its mouth lest that cursed energy spills out, which is what you see with its mega form. And then there's the strange case that you could argue for Yamask's line, specifically Galarian Yamask, and this is because the stone tablet has attached itself to Yamask and draws its power by absorbing it from Yamask. So maybe you could call the tablet a consumer in some capacity, but not necessarily Yamask itself. You can make that decision for your own sake. Dusknoir is actually incredibly fascinating. Honestly, its whole line is, since it is the final form of its line, and it actually does not eat anything. It is said to simply carry others to the afterlife by storing their souls into its body. It and many other dex entries seem to have at least one entry that misunderstand what a Pokemon is doing, and this is one of those cases. It may look like it is eating a soul, but it is just simply using its body as a car or ferry across the river Styx. Ditto is a Pokemon that doesn't have to eat. I have lamented its existence in my Ecology region series anytime it pops up. I love Ditto, but when it comes to an ecosystem, it gives me incredible pain because it's not even actually part of an ecosystem. It can perfectly replicate the cells of any other creature, meaning that it can just become a plant and photosynthesize if it wanted to. They don't even have to fight their own kind. They just see who can transform the best, and if an antagonistic Pokemon does see it, it can just transform into that Pokemon, threatening it and confuse it. As even Chatot directly states that it just mimics the sounds of a Pokemon looking at it, and the Pokemon just kind of goes, "Cousin Timothy, is that you? I haven't seen you since I was 5. Whoa!" And yeah, basically Ditto could probably do the exact same thing and never get eaten, as it now just theoretically exists outside of the food chain. Deoxys is technically right there as well, because while it is a special Pokemon, it's also technically a common space virus, so take that as you will. No disrespect to it though, it is a dope Pokemon, and despite being called a virus, it doesn't need to infect anything. In fact, it is a living virus in the Pokemon world. And that gets really weird, because viruses technically aren't living by our standards, and then now we take one extra step and it's a living one. Oh well. Either way, Deoxys at least doesn't seem to be attempting to infect anything, and so we can assume that it does not eat, and it's just kind of self-generating energy. Probably because it got hit by radiation, and that's all the energy it needs. Greavard might take life force away from you, but it does so unconsciously and without meaning to, so we might be able to assume that it doesn't need the energy. It is just a byproduct of it existing in cold environments and dying without knowing the warmth of love in its past life. It's dark, but it makes sense. And I'm going to rapid fire a lot of these because this feels a bit repetitive in this section, and I'll do the same in other sections where I feel like all I'm going to say is the same thing over and over again. Dreepy Line tries to eat Clauncher, but it can't. It just bites on them as it mimics its behavior from when it was alive. Shelgon is stated that it probably could eat, but seems to believe that it does not need to, as if it just starves itself, it'll get stronger and tougher and evolve sooner. You got this, little volleyball. Miraidon represents all of our future Paradox Pokemon. I'm not putting them all on the diagram, as none of them need to eat, but they likely can eat, as shown by the Herba Mystica sandwiches that are given to Miraidon and Koraidon. Perfect example of a creature eating whatever it has to in order to get the nutrients it needs in order to survive in its dire moments. The Igglybuff line and their Paradox are balloons, literally furry, fluffy balloons, and they likely don't even have organs. We can even look at Smash Bros. To see Jigglypuff flat into a pancake. LGM line are aliens without mouths and follow a lot of alien tropes, but don't seem to even consume thoughts. We get a big chunk of Pokemon that are made of clay, rock, coins, metal, and digital mass for Porygon, and every single one of them does not eat or consume any form of energy. It's actually strange to find that Shedinja is in the mineral egg group, and while it may absorb your soul if you look into its back, that is if you're like really peering into its back, to my knowledge. It is not trying to steal your soul in a malicious manner. Kind of a strange creature. Sigilyph and Unknown I group as symbols of the Pokemon world, one being the Nazca lines and the other being all forms of the alphabet. Yes, it goes even further than whatever alphabet you see them in. It goes all the way down to Greek, according to the anime, or further, potentially. Now, Meloetta is also there too because, you know, musical language, even though it is a special Pokemon. I don't know, I kind of mention things ahead of time sometimes, oops. Which, then again, we do bring in all of our special Pokemon again. Should be straightforward, so I'll discuss the ones that make you scratch your head as to why I put them here. Heatran is made of magma, it exists in solitude. Deontay theoretically lived for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years. It doesn't need to eat, but seems to enjoy interacting with human food, if I'm remembering this correctly. Volcania does not consume water, it just uses it for its attacks and does not die if it runs out of water. It just kind of needs to refill. You will notice of the original Regis, Regirock is not here. That's because it is technically considered to consume something, while Regice and Registeel are noted that nobody knows what or if they eat anything directly from the Pokédex. Also, Regigigas may have predated life on the planet, and it doesn't really have a mouth, so I don't think it's eating anything at all. Jirachi sleeps for thousands of years and doesn't eat anything. I mean, maybe it'll consume an apple when it comes down to Earth, but it doesn't need to. The Genie Quartet are considered gods of the seasons, which, again, gods don't really need to eat, theoretically speaking, and they've never been noted, despite all the information we have on them from the past of Hisui or otherwise, to have eaten anything, just kind of cause destruction, and then Landorus walks in because lightning and wind and storms enrich the soil. Meanwhile, Landorus walks in and it's like, oh yeah, let me take credit for this. Bunk! And that's how that works. The Tau Trio of Unova are also split pieces of gods, and the Note of Kyra being believed to eat people is exactly that, just a rumor. So, you know, it's not eating people. Hoopa is a genie that is not a descendant of Mew, as indirectly foretold by the Pokemon Adventures manga. And to quickly explain that better, a character by the name of Emerald uses soil from Mew's Island to calm Pokemon instantly. And this is because they all are reminded of the place in which they all come from, directly stated. And as such, when he meets Hoopa for the first time, he fires at Hoopa, and it doesn't work. Yet it works on almost literally every single other Pokemon he encounters, no matter how strong or angry they are. So that seems pretty clear to me that Hoopa is not of our planet or from Mew. Likely some sort of weird god, especially as it's kind of implied that it's almost as powerful as Arceus, and that's terrifying. Victini is a goddess of victory, inspired by Nike. Every single time I say that, I immediately think of that anime game, and I will not be showing that here. You know what I'm talking about, but she doesn't mind snacking on some macaroons. The legendary trio of Kalos are gods of the flow and balance of life, and it would be kind of funny and messed up if they actually did consume something. And then, of course, there's the Lake Guardians, the Origin Trio, and Arceus itself. all of whom predate traditional life in the universe itself and are gods. I mean, even the lake guardians themselves are called literal gods in direct translation, so we're gonna assume none of them consume anything. Hematophages, creatures in Pokemon and in real life that subsist entirely on blood. This is actually an incredibly fascinating and unique trait that requires unique adaptations to ensure that you basically don't take too many nutrients, such as iron and dye from it, amongst other reasons I am not educated enough to actually explain. But this is also my way of avoiding the absolutely massive groupings one last time, as we are closing in on the majority of our Pokemon that are within the next couple of sections. But here we only have 3 different Pokemon lines. Gliscor, who has become a vicious monster after its item-based evolution, states that grabbing prey using its tail, then biting their necks with its long, sharp fangs, it is even said to take pride once its prey is fully drained of blood. Just absolutely dusted. Gorbis is the terror of the deep, as when it spots prey, this Pokemon inserts its thin mouth into the prey's body and drains the prey of its bodily fluids. And finally, while Zubat does not state it, both Golbat and Crobat state that they subsist on blood. Crobat has learned to be silent in flight and only take what it needs, while Golbat is so gluttonous in its blood drinking that it will overfeed and become too fat to fly, which, yes, that means that other Pokemon will likely eat it then, and that's the circle of life, baby. Don't be so gluttonous next time. And we could also assume that Zubat would be a simple blood drinker as well because of its evolutions. I will at least admit before we go that it is stated in a single dex entry that Gorbis might feed on seaweed, but you can't really convince me that it's a common item that it eats. Not with the mouth that it has, that little siphon. No fancy name here, we have the Spiritrophs, creatures that consume the energy or spirit of other Pokemon as their primary food source, and these do get a little bit tricky with their wording. Duskull directly states that it enjoys stealing the spirits of children, which is dark and a little bit funny. Oops. While Drifloon's line is known to carry creatures away and never return. They're directly stated to not like heavy children, but when they do return after taking someone away, these Drifloon and Drifblim are said to have increased in size. This knowledge is sealed when we read in Drifblim's entries. Drifloon's body is filled with air, as well as the lost spirits of people and Pokemon. Its body expands as it collects more souls. If it explodes, these souls unleash with a screaming sound. This also explains why Drifblim is said to control its altitude by intaking and releasing air. It has air and souls. Great! And also, Drifblim will carry away Clamperl to never be seen again, as it's technically considered a predator of it, so that's fun. Along the same lines, the Frillish line is like the Drifblim of the sea. While Frillish is noted to actively attack Magikarp and Lantern, they will also actively drag people and other Pokemon down deep into the sea below where they live. And Jellicent is known to feed on life energy, where the more it drains, the bigger its crown gets, a visual kill count. Jellicents are highly feared by fishers, and you don't really stand a chance against them because, yeah, they take down entire cruise ships if they feel like it, which reminds me that, yes, I didn't include humans in this on purpose, and that is for really one reason only. 2 reasons. One is the fact that I just did not want to include them. I wanted the natural world without humans, and also in the great words of Arceus, as written down in the old verses by potentially Kogita, no claws nor fangs, no strength to claim, no man could hope to hold his own to mighty Pokemon. That was to the point where, you know, Arceus had to gift us 10 noble Pokemon in order to help keep us alive. Otherwise, humanity is literally stated to never be able to defeat Pokemon if weapons and technology were not involved. We are effectively the bottom of the food chain. Moving on to things that are totally a little less terrifying, we have the Litwick line, because Litwick will steal your life force while pretending to lead you through graveyards. Lampents will appear near hospitals when people are drawing their final breaths, so that way it can use their souls and dying energy. And then Chandelure states, after hypnotizing its opponent by waving these flames, it absorbs the victim's spirit. It is said that any spirits that get incinerated by Chandelure's flames end up losing their way and are forced to wander the mortal world forever. I hope you like limbo, because that's a terrifying form of limbo. Now, Chandelure is also known to reside in rundown mansions, and there's a rumor that some homes were illuminated by Chandelure instead of traditional lighting, which led to the deaths of many unfortunate residents. Beautiful, very awesome information, but all of them being incredibly terrifying active hunters of the soul. This whole section honestly makes me terrified, I have to admit, but we will trudge forward because Pumpkaboo and Gourgeist literally kidnap people. Children, adults, thin or thick, does not matter who you are, you have a place with these Pokemon. There is always a Pumpkaboo and Gourgeist just for you. Pumpkaboo will hypnotize you and take you away, while Gourgeist will sing to you as it wraps you up and absorbs your life energy. They are a terror, and I cannot imagine Halloween being a good day in the Pokemon world. Sandygast and Palossand might have the bones of other living creatures within their bodies, but those bodies just simply decayed inside of them, which, God, that's even scarier to think about. But we know they didn't technically eat these people because they describe themselves simply as Pokemon that do absorb energy from others rather than actually eating them. So now I imagine all of these Pokemon smell incredibly awful from the combination of all sorts of different decay on the beach and from whatever it ate or put into its body. That's a weird distinction. We now straddle the line of mineral and amorphous Pokemon with the Sinistea and Poltergeist lines, who literally just try to trick people into drinking them so that way they can steal their life energy, which is pretty straightforward. And along the lines of trickery is the Honedge line, as they just want someone to grab them so that way they can wrap their sashes around their victim's arm and drain life force from them. And every single time I say life force, I immediately think of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Life points, and that reminds me of the Flork of Crows comic.
Not so fast, Kaiba! Activate my trap card, room full of bananas!
Great, Yugi. How am I supposed to move in all this room full of bananas?
That's not all, Kaiba. I play from my hand, replace your blood with sand! It replaces all your blood with sand!
Snap back to Dhelmise, who is choosing Wailord as its primary target and draining the energy of it and any other creature it catches. And that includes humans, but it does have a nice friendly relationship with the Skrelp line. Frostlash straddles the line between mineral and fairy egg groups, and while it primarily targets male humans for soul consumption, it will eat any creature that comes its way by first freezing them, then consuming their soul. By the way, somehow the freezing power goes beyond the physical and freezes their soul. You did hear that correctly, because it does state frozen souls are their favorite food. I get that Chandelure burns up souls, but this is a whole nother level of terror. Bramblin and Brambleghast roam the sandy lands and grab whatever comes near them, and in a fashion similar to Gourgeist, wraps them up and consumes their energy. This includes humans, as a swarm of them have been noted to bury a town. What town, you might ask? I assume Old Cascarafa, because there are sandy ruins right by it and a moat around Cascarafa to protect them, as Bramblin's line vehemently hates water. Really good environmental storytelling. Now, the last ones before the center of our diagram are Galarian Corsola and Cursula, which are still in the water egg groups, which, I mean, yeah, they're in the water 1 and 3 egg groups. Water was just so good that they just skipped the sequel and went straight for the trilogy. But you just don't want to accidentally kick this ghost coral, as it will drain your life force, and eventually it will have so much ectoplasmic energy that it will burst from its dead outer casing and become Cursula, who will turn you into stone just by touching you. You know, similar to Medusa. But good on Pokemon Company, by the way, for not making this Pokemon a mineral egg group, as the real coral is a little polyp that likes to build these houses of vibrant coral that we get to see, and some of them do like to migrate around. At least before they become bleached by increased water temperatures. Yay, global warming! Making it to the center of our Spiritrophs, we start with Spectrier. Its kicks are said to separate a soul from its body, and it can steal the life force of sleeping beings. It feeds on the ambient life force it steals from others and will attack anyone who would try to disturb it. Somebody call Calyrex and tell it to please get this horse under wraps and away from people. Meanwhile, for anyone that is enamored by the fireworks created by Blacephalon, good job, your soul has been eaten, as it takes advantage of opponents' surprise to rob them of their vitality. And Buzzwole is not covert in the slightest, as despite what it looks like to us and what it does to Snorlax, it is directly stated. According to Wake from the Aether Foundation, Buzzwole's most distinctive feature is its skill to strengthen itself. Buzzwole is able to absorb energy and then achieve a chemical reaction between the energy it has absorbed and its own bodily fluids. There's a pretty strong distinction there between energy and bodily fluids. And after having other Pokemon that actively drink blood, it is very interesting to see this buff mosquito that drinks life energy instead. Buzzwole is also my favorite Ultra Beast because, I don't know, he's showy and fun and great. I mean, look at the goofy brute, but I digress. Our group here is complete. Chemotrophs, which are real, and by definition, a chemotroph is an organism that obtains energy by the oxidation of electron donors in their environments. These molecules can be organic, chemoorganotrophs, or inorganic, chemolithotrophs. The chemotroph designation is in contrast to phototrophs, which use photons. Chemotrophs can be either autotrophic or heterotrophic. Chemotrophs can be found in areas where electron donors are present in high concentration, for instance, around hydrothermal vents. That last part is important, and I will also note that I did group phototrophs in here as well, which would explain why the Alakid line is here, which do not show any evidence on any route of eating other Pokemon, but instead just consume electricity in any form that they can. Again, though, those hydrothermal vents are going to be an amazing example for some legendary Pokemon we will talk about later in this specific group. Let's see if you can figure out who those are before I actually mention them. Now, since I already talked about it, we can move from the Alakid line to Torkoal, who is noted to only eat coal for energy. Its name is Torkoal, after all. But to follow, Cetoddle and Cetitan eat snow and ice in their preferred chilly habitats for their nutrients. Technically, they eat minerals inside the snow and ice, which ice is a mineral in and of itself, so, you know, go figure. But Duraludon's line uses its arms, which have slightly different shapes from each other, to grind down rock surfaces for food. Duraludon has a rivalry with Tyranitar, which it shares its habitat with, and they often battle each other in the mountains of Galar. And considering they both do eat minerals, we'll have a nice connection to them to exemplify that they might just eat each other as well. Oh yeah, by the way, a lot of the mineral-based Pokemon attack and eat each other for their nutrients, their armor, whatever other needs that they have. They don't attack or really bother attack fleshy creatures like you and me because we don't have what they need, which is often like metals, like actual steel, iron, copper, or even magnetic material. Orthworm does as Duraludon does and will dig up soil and minerals to eat in order to maintain its steel body, and funny enough, it is still considered a field-type Pokemon. This is because worms are not insects and it is not made up of steel or rock, removing it from both the mineral grouping and the insect bug group for their eggs. Orthworm is literally a genuine worm that has a hardened body instead of a squishy one. Snom eats ice adorably. Ferrocede's line is noted to specifically scrape up minerals from the surface of rocks in order to absorb their nutrients and create moss, which, yeah, that checks out science-wise. And then the coughing line is strange, because I almost call them Detrivores, but they don't actually eat trash. They just consume the foul odors or toxic air itself emitted by the decay of trash or factories. This would, theoretically, make them chemotrophs, which makes it worse as they create new toxins in their bodies unless you're the Galarian variant, which produces clean air. Just don't go near it because it does have concentrated around it, which is toxic to us, and I don't know if that is toxic because of chemicals or toxic because it's releasing ozone. I don't really know. Sableye is digging through caves and eating gems while also hunting down Carbink. Rotom states no diet, but it is the photon Pokemon, so I assume that it is consuming electricity for energy and would be a phototroph, as we talked about earlier. And similar to Sableye, Cofagrigus is consuming golden nuggets for its sustenance. Gotta maintain that perfect gold coffin somehow. And it also serves as the divider between amorphous and mineral Pokemon, because Oh boy, are there a lot of mineral Pokemon. Starting with Glimit's line, who not only absorbs nutrients from the cave walls it resides in, but once it evolves, it is noted to consume the energy and physical Terra crystals that are found near them. The Vanilla line predates Ice Cream and is not a parasite. It's a weird pet peeve of mine that this keeps going around, but it does drink water and use sunlight to grow. This is because it needs the water so it can freeze and stay safe while the sunlight slowly melts it and allows it to freeze any water produced and grow like a normal icicle throughout its life. If it melts down to nothing, they do die. So they try to avoid that. Klefki used to live in the mines before it had to leave due to a lack of iron ions found there after humans dug everything out. Now it collects keys and consumes any metal ions that may exist in the keys and often inhabits abandoned hotels more than anything else in the wild. And further inward in this circle is the Beldum line, which absolutely actively hunts other Pokemon, but its body is composed of magnets and is noted to love the magnetic minerals found in Nosepass the most, meaning that it is absolutely only hunting other mineral Pokemon, especially magnetic ones. Sorry, Nosepass, but I'm happy Metagross will never hunt me down and bite me while I'm still alive, because yes, that's exactly what it does. It does not knock out its prey, it still eats them while they are kicking and screaming, and that haunts me. Roly-Poly is the only one of its line to state a diet, but it's fair to say that they all eat coal as it races around on grassy plains and the rough rocky terrain in coal mines and caves, burning through the coal that sustains it. Also, because I haven't said it, we are not really considering Gigantamax and Mega Pokemon here, as none of them actually change their diets, except for, Glalie, but we'll get there. And they just overall become more dangerous or aggressive or powerful in general. They all also technically don't occur naturally outside of special conditions or areas. Nosepass and its evolution are noted to use their magnetism to hunt for prey as they search for metals. Probopass even going as far to say that it uses its mini noses, yes, that's the actual technical term, to destroy their prey. Fido's line is the only dog that isn't a dog technically. It's part dog. It's like in the field and mineral A group. And since it has yeast breath, I'm just assuming that it doesn't need to eat traditionally, as it could just consume water and sugar to grow, as it may be composed of yeast itself. If you'd like, you could consider it an herbivore, as it may be primarily getting its sugars from certain berries found in the wild. Either way, it's not an omnivore, as most dogs are typically slated or stated to be. Magnemite's line, including the Paradox of Sandy Shocks, consumes electricity. Even Sandy Shocks likely does this, as based on its design, it's less of a paradox and more of a Pokemon that lived 1,000 years. I talked about this in my Iceberg series, but there's evidence that Sandy Shocks is actually similar to an Oni with its magnetic hair, its colors, and the fact that it is stated to have lived an incredibly long time. Things living for long periods of time in myth have often turned into Oni or demons of some sort, and this may represent a Magneton that did exactly that. Either way, technically a phototroph, but pretty nice and simple. Following up, we have Onyx, who is noted to absorb any hard objects it encounters while digging through the earth, and over time it becomes Steelix. But it doesn't change its... do we call it a diet? I'm calling it a diet, even though it doesn't necessarily eat it, it just kind of absorbs it. Pokemon are weird. And then Qfant directly states that it crushes and grinds up rocks for food in its Pokedex entry, and we can assume that Caparajah does exactly the same. Regular Voltorb and Electrode are also noted to consume electricity, while the Bonsly line is only here by technicality. This is because in the anime, Bonsly is noted to need nutrients to be delivered to it when it is especially young or it could die. This makes me assume that their line uses their hard spheres to grind up nutrients from their environment like a mortar and pestle, and then consume the dust left behind while crying or sweating any moisture that they accidentally absorb, as they will also die if too much water is in their bodies. And then there's Meteor. It eats dust in the atmosphere. The composition of the dust determines the color of its core. It is also known to be food for other Pokemon, but it doesn't state what Pokemon would eat it. The only one we actually confirmed no would be Rayquaza, but there has to be other Pokemon able to reach it. I guess technically any of our other mineral-eating Pokemon could, since they are likely valuable metals such as iridium, which can only be found in large amounts in meteors, and those are probably incredibly tasty, though the only time that they would fall or be eaten is when they would fall down. Otherwise, again, we know Rayquaza eats it. Varoom attaches itself to rocks that resemble wheels, and these rocks constitute Varoom's diet as it feeds on minerals from the rocks and converts them to energy. The adorable Snorunt eats nothing but ice, and people even give it gifts of ice to it. That sounded like I made it sound like Snover eats people. No. Either way, and then we have the fated Pokemon with the Clefairy line. I will fight to my dying breath that they are either Chemotrophs or they don't eat anything at all, or they just drink water. They are only noted to dance under the moon all night and then consume water after dancing all night. We can assume that they do not use moonlight for energy, and yes, I know moonlight is not a thing in the real world, technically, but in the world of Pokemon, it is a separate thing from sunlight. Plus, actually, technically, at night when the sun does go down, certain wavelengths of light do go away, but others are constant throughout all times of the day. So, technically, you could be saying that this is what moonlight is, whatever wavelengths exist after the sun goes away. But either way, again, front-facing eyes and sharp teeth do not mean that the creature at hand is a predator species, and if you believe that, then you need to stop. Full stop, because that is not backed up consistently in nature at all, as I remind you of the sharp-toothed root-eating deer. Again, Clefairy's line is likely just a chemotroph, consuming whatever it can within water, as it is not even from our planet, and clearly there has to be water from wherever it came from, which would be its main source of energy there as well, which allows it to naturally drink our water without even having to think about it. Tinkatink's line is really weird because it states very directly that it will not only attack Pokemon such as Corviknight for metal, but it directly states Tinkatuff makes its hammer using metal. It collects from groups of Poniard and Bisharp, which it preys on. Which that seems to insinuate that it not only rips them apart for its hammer, but whatever meaty bits are left behind, or maybe even some of those minerals, are straight up eaten by this line. And considering their teeth do kind of look like grinders, I'm willing to believe that it does in fact eat mineral-based Pokemon. It's also noted that if their hammers are stolen, a Pokemon that eats metals will be the one to eat the hammer. The last few in this section before all of our special Pokemon are fairly direct, with exception to the Bergmite line. I will admit that I was tempted to throw them into the Herbivore section thanks to the Pokemon Legends Arceus game, but the diets in that game are not reliable or accurate to Dex entries of Pokemon. It's more of a game mechanic, just like picnics or berry eating. Instead, considering that these Pokemon live in icy environments or on the water and are not noted to hunt or be hunted by any Pokemon for consumption, they do freeze the air around them to create their shell. I would still like to believe that they are either absorbing something from the ice they create, or they are Autotrophs that use cold energy to fuel them, which is not really a thing in the real world to my knowledge, but again, Pokemon doesn't follow our rules. This would also explain why it fights with Frigibacks, but they don't consume each other. They want to live in the coldest areas for their needs, and if it does absorb cold energy for its energy, then it belongs to the same section as Frigibacks, and we'll get there later. The Aeron line is noted to eat anything that has iron in it, whether that be iron ore or giant metal machines and railways. Lairon adds to this by drinking mineral water from fresh springs, and while Aggron states no additional diet, I would not be surprised if it fought Tyranitar whenever they popped up, since Aggron claims and takes deep care of an entire mountain and its area, going as far as planting trees after wildfires. Insanely intelligent creature that does not get enough credit. But speaking of the Mountain Eater, we do have Larvitar and Tyranitar, who are so confident in their invincibility, or at least Tyranitar is, that it just sleeps out in the open. But Larvitar first eats enough soil to equal a mountain before it evolves into Pupitar, then eventually, after waiting its time, turns into Tyranitar, who states no diet, but I would likely state that it is likely eating some mountain rocks here and there, or other mineral Pokemon such as Duraludon and Archaludon, as we've discussed, in order to at least maintain its carapace body. And then we finally hit the messiest grouping of special Pokemon in this entire food chain. As a reminder, if you think differently than I do, feel free to explain in the comments below with evidence of your thinking, as I am again basing everything we have here on confirmed information, not random hypotheticals. Plus, it's fun to read the comments. The most controversial of them all may be my decision on Eternatus, as it is supposed to represent nuclear radiation. It is born of the stars, creates giant kaiju fights, and this is even further pushed with the whole plot of Sword and Shield with Rose. And in space where it is from, there's nothing to shield you from the pure radiation or UV rays, or anything else really that affects you. As such, thanks to its seemingly infinite energy, I suspect it may be absorbing general radiation and releasing that in concentrated forms of the wishing stars. I guess would you call it an autotroph then? I don't really know. Either way, this makes the most sense scientifically, as it even was able to recover on our planet where it has nothing to consume, but everything does have a form of radiation no matter how small, even if it's not inherently harmful to us. As such, again, Eternatus, Eternamax, absorbing general radiation, turning that into physical wishing stars and releasing that onto our planet. Cosmog is directly stated to eat space dust in order to evolve, and even Cosmoem continues to do exactly this. The representative of the cosmos or nebula, hence the names of Cosmog and Nebi, which then condense into a protostar, as they are literally called the protostar Pokemon. Then they fully form into a celestial body that is either Solgaleo or Lunala, which, theoretically speaking, the sun is performing constant nuclear fusion with hydrogen, at least to my understanding. So Solgaleo may be self-sustaining, while Lunala would be more solidified celestial body that is the moon, of course, or a moon. So if you want, you can place them into the Nihilivore section, up to you. Xurkitree is another phototroph, as it absorbs electricity by attaching itself to the ground like some sort of electric tree, using the electricity for sustaining itself, like food-wise and for battle. The Melted line is directly stated to eat metal, and they even cry gallium tears. Regirock, as hinted at earlier, does use rocks to form its body, which, by Pokemon standards, they do state that it's technically consuming them. Regidrago is likely doing something similar with general draconic energy, while Regieleki is another Pokemon composed of and consuming electricity. Then we get Necrozma. Nice and simple, actually. It does need to consume light and only parasites onto Lunala and Solgaleo in order to take their light. This is different from photosynthesis. Necrozma is literally consuming light, and it is gifted light onto Alola and other planets, but it also needs to consume light lest it runs out and turns into its prism form. And then the last trio we have here, who is Rayquaza, who eats meteors and whatever else it wants in the atmosphere, but two that might surprise you are Kyogre and Groudon. They do not eat anything, but they do absorb primal energy of the planet by staying close to areas where it leaks out. This is at the bottom of oceans or lava basins, and this is where I tell you that this is, as I realized, just a reference to geothermal energy. And geothermal energy is constantly naturally created deep into our planet, and that heat is released through the planet's layers through a number of different ways. If that ever runs out, by the way, our planet is effectively dead, so let's hope that never happens, or, I mean, we won't have to worry about it for long at least. But this would make perfect sense as the object of our consumption for our duo here, especially when the meteor that crashed down on the planet and released an immense amount of energy wasn't carrying the energy they needed. It simply created a new route for the energy of the planet to explode from. This also allows for a greater distinction of how these two gain power separate from Rayquaza, which is very thematically fitting. But we have now closed out our Chemotrophs, and we can move on. Welcome to the fourth largest section that we have, the Autotrophs, at the bottom of our diagram. Now, an Autotroph is an organism that can convert abiotic sources of energy into energy stored in organic compounds, which can be used by other organisms. And who would have guessed the majority of our plants Pokemon are found here, but not all of them. And I mean, that could be the case for real life as well, as not every single plant has chlorophyll or goes through photosynthesis as an autotroph. Now, I'm not going to waste your time or anyone else's by explaining every single one of the plants, because it can be chalked up to them directly stating that they only photosynthesize and fight only as a form of defense, or that they have the chlorophyll ability, which again, they're not hunting any form of prey whatsoever. Instead, I will highlight a couple that are sure to raise some questions. The Bounsweet lines state no diet whatsoever and does not have the chlorophyll ability, but it is very defensive due to it being hunted by other Pokemon, such as Toucanon, Gradients, and once it is Steenie, Corvusquire. Despite this, it does still have a hardened calyx, as it states, which is green, and does not put any pressure on any other Pokemon, so we could safely theorize that it does photosynthesize. Fomantis's line just mimics bugs in order to get bug-type Pokemon to leave it alone, but if it gets too close, it will still fight, but not eat what it kills. Meanwhile, Leafeon is the only evolution that we know without a doubt does not eat other Pokemon, as every single cell in its body has been changed to be exactly like a plant cell, as it does now use photosynthesis as its main action of feeding. And despite its aggressive nature, Scovillain does not consume other Pokemon. Lotad relies upon its lily pad to photosynthesize and give energy to it, otherwise it gets very sick. And then Sprigatito's line is the only feline that goes completely against cats, or felines in general, being obligate carnivores, and simply does nothing but photosynthesize and be incredibly needy but adorable for attention as the lovely show magician that it is. After all, you can't have an audience if they're all dead. I'll also note now that Skiddo is stated to not need to eat as long as the foliage on its back stays healthy, so we could just leave it as an autotroph, while Helioptile's line states it needs solar energy or it gets sickly and will pass away. All really simple, as we are over halfway through the grouping of the autotrophs. Now, a Pokemon important to an ecosystem in which it would be found in is the Turtwig line, which does photosynthesize across its shell, apparently, while also eventually evolving to not only guide others to sources of water, but also provide amounts of food in the form of berries or nuts, and even shelter once it becomes Torterra, as it will then allow Pokemon to potentially even spend their entire lives from birth to death on their backs, which is insanely beautiful. Now we start running into technicalities within the mineral group. Now, Frigibax's line is really odd, as it does not hunt, but rather directly states that it turns cold temperatures into energy that it can use, and does not expand on that any further in any of its evolutions or dex entries or anything. I'm just gonna call it an autotroph, using, again, that cold energy. To follow, there's the Clink line, who generates their own energy when they link together. This is done through magnetic energy, as they have the plus and minus ability, and as long as they keep moving, they will continue to generate life energy for themselves through this. Again, another technicality. Hisuian Voltorb's line is a strange one that does state that they photosynthesize and absorb electric energy, so sure, call them phototrophs or autotrophs as you may want. And then Solrock and Lunatone are fairly straightforward, with Moonlight and Sunlight increasing their powers in that order respectively. I just realized something. The Voltorb line has always been really weird. There's something inside of them that controls those bodies, right? Because it's an apricorn ball and it's a Pokeball. And if Hisuian Voltorb in the modern day is able to absorb electricity, then over time it would have then adapted from photosynthesis to just simply absorbing electricity, because it changed the container that it was in. And that was to make sure it didn't go extinct. They're kind of like a Mexican jumping bean in such a weird way. Finally, the last defined section here are our fairies, and oddly enough, Castform is partly in the fairy A group. It also is just as much outside the food chain as Ditto, in my opinion, but more importantly, it is an H2O molecule that changes with the weather. As such, it is likely absorbing energy from something in the atmosphere that we cannot scientifically replicate in order to have energy and naturally changing forms for cast form. Meanwhile, the Flebebe line and Comfy somehow have a symbiotic nature with the flowers that they choose, for without them, they grow weak and may even die. Because of the symbiotic nature, I'm assuming that they are relying purely on the energy derived from photosynthesis in order to get their own energy, and once again, by technicality, we have an autotrophic organism. Alternatively, if we want to make it more realistic, we could say that they're more like a fungus of sorts that is giving nutrients to the flower while receiving energy in return. But that's not what Pokemon does, and these are fairies, and Pokemon that are considered aliens in the Pokemon world are fairies, or at least that was the original full plan, so it's just such a toss-up. Grookey's line is an odd one, because they are one with nature and photosynthesize while stating nothing about hunting for prey. In fact, they want peace in its entirety amongst itself, their group, and even seclude themselves a lot. Because when we look at monkeys and apes, they're not only eating fruits and berries, but they're eating lots of insects and might even eat other small mammals, which it shouldn't be funny to me, but it always is, because they always talk about eating just like these tiny little animals, and it just makes me think like a cartoon. They're just gonna pop it into their mouth like a little piece of popcorn. Either way, due to information that we have on hand and their incredibly close, almost symbiotic relationship with nature, the Grookey line are Autotrophs, but they may occasionally enjoy a fruit or two if they feel like it. We conclude our Autotrophs with our special Pokemon as always, and they're mostly straightforward. Shaman is a plant hedgehog whose powers are derived from nature and can only exist in its sky form when the sun is up, similar to that of a blooming flower during the warm day, and then at night when it gets cold, it conserves energy and closes itself back up. Celesteela absorbs nutrients as any other plant would, as it is designed particularly after bamboo as one of its inspirations. The problem with them is that they take too much without realizing it, I assume, and that's why they visit other planets. Otherwise, they would destroy their own, and then they just kind of take all the nutrients, and then they go back home, likely to some sort of moon, since they're also partially inspired by Kaguya, is it Kaguya-sama? No, that's Love is War. That's Kaguya-hime. There it is. Too many Kaguyas out there. Ogerpon is an orange. This isn't even a joke. This is one of my top 3 favorite Pokemon. You can literally see it right behind me on that top shelf, and it's an orange. It doesn't have arms. It just has a cloak of leaves that it kind of uses as though it were arms. And if we were to look at its other forms, we can see that it uses the power of the elements of nature, allowing it to happily and energetically exist as it is one with that energy in our world. In the same manner as Ogerpon, we do have the guardian deities of Alola, the Tapus. They all rely on the energy of nature and Necrozma's light in order to have power and continue protecting the lands. This is exemplified when humans ruined the alternate timeline in which Guzzlord destroyed Alola, because it is hinted, at least in the games, that humans ruined the ecosystem of Alola long before Guzzlord arrived, making it so that the Tapus had no power and couldn't fight back, as eventually even Necrozma's light stopped reaching the lands, Z-moves went away, and that's it. Everything got destroyed. And the Tapu's signature moves are literally called Nature's Wrath. So we can't make it much more clear than that they are akin to Autotrophs, if they are not at least Autotrophs. Terapagos is the strangest one here, and I would be willing to say that it does eat, but it's incredibly complicated. I would like to keep it in this Autotroph section because we know nothing about the rest of its species in solid concrete words, but what we do know is that Terapagos not only encased itself in crystals to save itself, but somehow was continuing to generate energy in Terra crystals for all of Paldea, I guess technically all of Area 0. It's almost as if it's deriving energy from somewhere that it's not eating from, not consuming, then releasing that in excess amounts of energy. And it's originally just supposed to be a common animal. The only reason it's a legendary is because of the fact that it's the only one of its species that we're aware of, and it generates the Terra crystals of Paldea. it has to be deriving its energy from somewhere, and so I'm gonna assume it's an Autotroph. Honestly, with it being so far underground, it may even be similar to Groudon and Kyogre as a Chemotroph. Place it wherever you feel most comfortable. I love the Pokemon, but it gives me a little bit of a headache. We finally move upwards in a traditional food chain as we talk about herbivores, and oh boy, are there a lot of herbivores! An herbivore is an animal anatomically and physiologically evolved to feed on plants, especially upon vascular tissues such as foliage, fruits, or seeds, as the main components of its diet. Now, I want to clarify now, there are Pokemon that will just eat all of these things, but will not hunt plant Pokemon. This is complicated, but it makes sense for Pokemon such as Shuckle, who ferments berries but does not attack any berry-related Pokemon. And once again, since we started with Shuckle, why don't we begin with the rest of our insects? And yeah, I know Shuckle is a slime mold, but it's in the insect egg group. Pokemon is weird. This is the 4th or 5th time I've said it. Whatever. Ledian is found here and is believed to use starlight as energy. And the patterns on its back grow larger or smaller depending on the number of stars in the sky. So yes, the sun is a star, I understand that, but it's not using the sun for energy. In addition to starlight though, it loves to eat berries. I would have thrown it into the Autotroph section, but it's hard to understand whether it relies more on the berries or if it relies more on the starlight. And which one is supposed to be metabolism-based power or fighting power, or if both are for both? Whatever, thanks Pokemon. Blipbug is the only one of its line to state that it is often found in gardens, and considering it's just a ladybug larva that becomes a ladybug, we can safely assume that it's just eating plants. And yes, once again, ladybugs may eat aphids, small insects, sap, nectar, and plants. All of it or some of it, but it just seems like it's not putting pressure on other Pokemon and is likely just eating the plants. Especially as even as it evolves, it doesn't seem to become aggressive towards any other Pokemon, even though its G-Max form does have that weird entry stating that if it used all of its power, it could control literally every single mind in a 10-mile radius, which I don't want to know how they found that one out. Paris and Parasect are controlled by the Tochukaso mushrooms that are on its body. These mushrooms tell them to just munch on some tree roots and steal their nutrients, be little parasites. Parasite. And Paris itself isn't much of an issue, but Parasect will have full infestations, which will potentially destroy entire forests. This species canonically fight with the Morula line, considering they appear in the same area in Alola, and Morula will keep a forest alive with all of their power. Though there is no confirmation that they eat each other, it is theoretically possible. Actually, you know what? Parasect mothers will actually sprinkle spores on their babies, and that's how the mushrooms grow on them. So what if we had a Paris that had Morula spores put onto it? Can we get that variant out there? A variant that is actually a symbiotic creature, not one that is an actual full-on parasite that ends up dying because its body is being taken over by fungus? That'd be pretty cool. Someone make it. Join the Discord. Show me. Durant eats leaves and leaves only. Nimble's line states no diet, but they are inspired by grasshoppers and locusts, primarily the latter of those two, meaning that they are primarily eating plants. And then Scatterbug's line directly states it eats various types of plants, including poisonous leaves and roots. The poison it ingests is processed and turned into a black powder that it scatters all over its body, a little dusting if you would. This powder causes paralysis on contact and allows Scatterbug to deter bird Pokemon from attacking. The powder also regulates Scatterbug's temperature, allowing it to adapt to any climate. Grafii is a natural predator of Scatterbug. This is consistent through Scatterbug's line that the black powder is an incredibly vital piece to its living, and it's even getting rid of poisonous plants because of its diet. Only for Grafii to just come in, eat it, and produce its own sweet-smelling poison, but we'll get to Grafii later, okay? Get out of here. Birds, in general, will attack this line, but it does state that Rufflet, as an example, is a natural predator of Spupa. Weedle and Caterpie do eat leaves, and I just want to remind you that they would be hunted by Pidgey and its line. It doesn't state it directly, but it's a safe assumption. Do not use size as a factor of whether or not a Pokemon would hunt another Pokemon. Weavile hunts Mammal Swine. Ghastly is even noted to be able to kill Caparaja, so even type matchups do not always matter. Moving forward though, Wurmple do be munching at that leaf, while Dustox will swarm forests, eat every single leaf on a tree, and then be attracted to buildings where they just swarm. I feel bad for Hoenn because that is a terrifying thought. Imagine having your light on at home, and the next thing you know, you just hear that loud clunk of glass as a multi-foot large creature, insect, slams into your window at night, let alone a swarm of 10 of them just dunk. Burmy and Wormadam are bagworms. They don't state their diet, but I've dealt with some bagworms and know that they will infest trees and primarily eat leaves, or maybe just drain the tree of their nutrients overall. This matches perfectly with how these Pokemon attach to and hang from trees. Nincada states it lives underground to feed on the moisture and nutrients of tree roots, but then Ninjask states it will congregate to feed on the sap of trees. So I'm not really sure what it does more of, and you could throw Ninjask in with the Nectarivores if you so wish. And before we move on to our birds, with Axew and Drampa here, because this whole diagram was already overcrowded and I didn't feel like adding another section, we have Larvesta. Actually, I just realized I don't think I put in Hisui and Lilligant on the diagram. Imagine it's there. Anywho, Larvesta states no diet, but it also doesn't seem to hunt Pokemon at all. So with its inspiration in mind, as we previously mentioned, this little guy is likely an herbivore. So big shocker, every bird we see here is an herbivore. They state that they eat seeds or fruit only, or in the case of the Farfetch'd line, they only eat their leek that they carry around with them as a weapon. This is incredibly strange for a Pokemon such as the Pick-a-Peck line, since, you know, those are woodpeckers. But it seems to make a very clear case that they only eat seeds and berries. But they do hunt down the Bone-Sweet line as previously stated, so they are eating plants. And then there is one weird exception to this that I will explain, and that is because Pick-a-Peck will feed on Metapod specifically. This is likely less about eating Metapod and more about increasing the durability of its beak, considering the sheer durability of Metapod. Otherwise, we don't see it hunting any other bug Pokemon from what I found in any other dex entry, any other route whatsoever, so this makes perfect sense. Now, I kept P-Dove here because it's mostly going to eat seeds, grains, berries, and fruit. They might eat insects, snails, and worms on a rare occasion, or scraps thrown to them, and that's mainly based on the inspirations that it has of the pigeon, for example. Meanwhile, as it evolves, they are peaceful creatures that likely have the same diet. But what is strange is that it evolves into Unpheasant, who is suddenly very combative, despite Tranquil stating that it just does not fight. This is all because the Unpheasant have the ability Rivalry, which when we pair it with their male and female forms being different in order to attract mates, we can understand that they are likely only aggressive between males, fighting for dominance, fighting for territory, fighting so that way they can procreate and have a bunch of babies. The rest of our birds aren't really much to talk about, and you can tell what they eat for the most part just by looking at their beaks real quickly, because Pokemon's actually fairly good about using their beaks to actually tell you what the Pokemon eat, and it's consistently accurate for the most part. But we have Axew, who is the only one of its line to be an herbivore. They are just using their tusks and will cut berries with them for food, maybe digging up some roots. Drampa is a wild one that is based on a super powerful mountain god. And while that god doesn't eat anything, Drampa sure does. In fact, the powerful Drampa will only eat special berries that grow at the bottom of the mountains that it dwells at. So they're just gonna take that trip every single day, down, up. They're also massive, which is stunning for this Pokemon that just most people sleep on. They just kind of ignore its existence, and it's really cool when you look at its inspirations. Crossing the border between flying and fairy is the Togepi line. There's no diet, but they are creatures of absolute peace without quarrel. They share happiness with all and will disappear if there is any strife, so how could they not be herbivores? And then I love this Spritzy duo because they do state that they smell good and their scent depends on their diet, but it does not state what their diets are. Well, they are inspired by the plague doctors, and they would fill their beaks with theriac, a compound of more than 55 herbs and other components like viper flesh powder, cinnamon, myrrh, and honey. Thank you, National Geographic, by the way. And where do we find this species? Always near or in flowers, at least within the Kalos region, meaning that their diet is likely any herbs, seeds, flowers, honey, or anything else that does not require hunting another living creature. And that is how they get their smells, which is an amazing little detail. Dino is here for the same reason that the Chansey line is here. They basically refuse to hurt other Pokemon unless push comes to shove, and they are the medics of the Pokemon world. Swirlix's line is another that feeds on sugars in order to survive, and what's fun about Swirlix in particular is that it is first found on a route right next to the berry fields in Kalos, meaning that once again, we have a Pokemon that is likely eating a ton of berries just for their sugary content. I would like to say the same for Milcery and Alchemy, but they're a toss-up as they state no diet, and Milcery is born from sweet smells. They're literal milk, sorcery, and alchemy cream for their names, so maybe they drink milk? I don't know. It's really hard to say, especially as they will even spray their cream at people. Please don't make me say that again. Please. I don't think anyone could pay me enough to say that sentence again. The Pikachu line and their cousins are all incredibly strange. You get mice and rats of all kinds, but guess what? They aren't even actually part of the field egg group. They're not actual mice or rats by that standard. They're only part of the fairy egg group. Not all of them, but a good chunk of them are. So they're, again, not technically mice. Either way, they do eat seeds and berries and move on with their lives. Though Dedenne, being a dormouse, is very cute, and it might be eating some pollen and nectar. Our other fairy egg group Pokemon are odd, like Phalanx. I didn't even realize it was a fairy egg group. Probably because it's a little Kirby gladiator, but it has no diet. It seems to be active in finding opponents for itself. Honestly, they are never even shown to have mouths, so for all we know, maybe they don't actually need to eat and they're in the wrong section. So you can place them in the Nihilivores if you so wish. Indeedee is just another Chansey, but instead of a nurse, it's a butler. Woo! Call Alfred. And then the Hatcham line just lives in complete solitude, far away from everyone and everything, because they're so sensitive to strong emotions of others to the point that they will vibe check you into the ground and rip you apart. Literally stated in their Pokédex if you are too angry, too happy, too sad, too scared. Doesn't matter. Can you imagine running into one and originally you were really happy? It starts beating you into the ground and you get scared, so it starts beating you into the ground even harder? That's horrible. How does anybody have it as a pet unless you're just talking like this the entire time, like some of the comments want me to do, because you just want the facts and you don't want emotion? Learn to do research yourself if you want that. Anywho, Squavid ingredients become fat on berries, but are also hunted by gumshoes as their natural predator, and we reach the field egg group, which I see that I mixed in with the humanoid egg group, which is fine. And while I keep bringing up egg groups, those are not our main focus. It's just to help us visualize mammals, amphibians, fish, reptiles, you name it. But this is a big section of this grouping, and I can make it real easy. Palmy's line are another set of medics in the world of Pokemon. Their hands are literal defibrillators, and they get the revival blessing move naturally, so I'm saying they're herbivores. To add to this, they are likely inspired by the alpine marmot, and those creatures are primarily herbivores according to BBC, and might on occasion, very rare occasion, eat insects. Cinchino's line are all about being clean, and again, despite inspirations, they seem to not even hunt grass or bug-type Pokemon, so they're likely subsisting on berries. Even more Pokemon break the rules as we know them with real-life animals, with Patrat and Watchog, who only eat berries so they can have a healthy supply of seeds for ammunition. It's kind of really dope when you think about it that way, like, hey, can we get food and ammunition from a single source? So let's just adapt to solely eat anything that has seeds. Really, really great adaptation. Our rabbit Pokemon are a no-duh as they eat grasses and flowers. Bidoof's line are beavers, and they're also going to eat grasses and leaves, maybe a little bit of bark, but Chessmen's line are known to strictly eat berries, which will actually improve the durability of their bark shell. Though chessmen eating macaroons will always be cute to me, they are not actual plants. They just have planty powers. Spinda is one of my favorites in terms of diet, I will add, because not only is it a red panda instead of an actual bear, it also breaks the diet rules of reality as it lives in areas in which it hunts nothing. But instead, we can make easy claim that it primarily eats berries. My reasoning for this is because they are always dizzy and stumbling around as if they're drunk. This is something that occurs in robins when they eat honeysuckle berries or cows when they eat cranberries. Animals will literally get drunk, or at least how we perceive to be drunk, because of their bodies processing these sugars in these nutritious berries. And we can say the same for Spinda here. Another really cool one or actually two, are Oranguru and Passimian. And they're amazing. They're arguably probably two of my top 15 favorite ecology-based Pokemon, as they are pure herbivores despite their inspirations of lemurs and orangutans, who would mostly lean into being omnivores in the real world. I found this out by looking at the lush jungle in Alola, which I will simply tell you what I said in my Alola ecology. I'm going to make the argument that Oranguru strictly only eats fruits and veggies. Maybe some bark, roots, and leaves, pretty much anything excluding other Pokemon. My reasoning for this is because in their SOS call, Trumpbeak will come to its aid, a Pokemon that eats berries and spreads their seeds through its attacks. This would be a perfect Pokemon to instruct, as Oranguru can get Trumpbeak to leave seeds of its favorite berries nearby and then help them grow. This may also be a big help to keeping the forest so healthy. Meanwhile, Passimian serves the same purpose, but it just throws fruit around while collecting the fruit that it actually eats. They fight, but they don't hunt other creatures. These two are not only going against the norm, but they are also keystone species of the Pokemon world. Note to self, keystone species video, just like I need an invasive species video. Anywho, continuing around there is Zarude, who will scare away Pokemon but does not hunt any, seeming to eat flora or even absorb energy from trees. We know Komala eats unnamed leaves that are poisonous and induce it into an eternal sleep. It's also preyed upon by Drowsy, but Drowsy theoretically doesn't kill them, at least not directly. Wooloo's line are sheep, which I should not have to explain. In fact, we have cows, bulls, sheep, deer, and horses in many forms, all eating grass, tree shoots, leaves, any combination, you name it. Also, my baby Girafarig and Farigiraf are here. They're not equine, but for some reason I placed them here and I never removed them, and I'm not gonna. I will also note that this area was so incredibly overcrowded that it took a lot of effort to even place them on the circle, so excuse the messiness. This is my first time creating this type of diagram. Now, some more strange Pokemon you wouldn't expect here include Absol. Now, it doesn't state a diet, but nearly every location we find it in is on a route before disaster. Routes just outside of Regirock's location, at the top of Mount Coronet before Dialga and Palkia are summoned, and even just outside of Kyurem's lair. It is always with a random mix of Pokemon and is noted to absolutely hate and detest fighting. So there is a good chance that this mystical dog-like creature is eating roots and berries, putting those claws to good use. Swinub's line loves to feed on mushrooms and roots, not hunting other Pokemon. And then we have the rest of our elephant mammoths, which is really cool when you place them all next to each other, or at least the majority of them. They, of course, all eat grasses, leaves, fruit, bark, and roots, and all that good stuff. Apom's line only eats fruit, and in fact, they will get into fights with the Mankey line because they will often eat the same fruit. Those angry pig monkeys only eat fruit also, by the way, and get into a lot of fights with other Pokemon, which we'll discuss later. Also, I keep saying that word, I didn't say it earlier, but Ambipom will fight with Passimian over territory, and somehow, despite the normal typing and fighting typing, once again, managed to still win half of the time, which is incredibly impressive. From pig monkeys to pigs, there's the Lechonk line, who are noted to eat primarily rich berries, and then the Spoink lines, who are noted to primarily eat mushrooms, and steal pearls from clam pearl, which, theoretically speaking, the clam pearl is just an eel egg that forms inside of clam pearl, since clam pearl itself is stated to not be the pearl. More weird Pokemon. I'll mark it as Spoink's prey, but the only way I can imagine it actually getting the pearl is if a drift blim drops it off, because jumping in water is not something that typically goes well unless you're an anime character. Slackoth's line is pretty funny because they don't prey on other species, but just eat grass and leaves, maybe some bark. Even once it reaches Slack King, it's known to just kind of lounge about, eat all the grass that it can reach, and then only move when there's no grass within said reach. Smeargle is the beagle dog that goes against normal dog diets, as it is found to be most often in solitude away from other Pokemon within Hoenn. Even when it isn't in solitude, it seems to just exist peacefully with other Pokemon while using the fluids it excretes from its tail in order to paint. And yes, that is exactly how it's described. Excretes fluids from its tail. As such, it is likely eating berries and releasing the pigments through its tail, almost like colored pee. There's even more monkeys that are somehow pure herbivores as we look at the Sage, Seer, and Poor trios. They work together, share berries and water with each other and even other Pokemon, and even cook said berries. The forests they live in show that they are not an antagonistic species, not even attacking grass-type Pokemon, which, before studying Unova ecology, I would have never expected. Cyndaquil's line states nothing about hunting prey, but instead that they use their flames for protection and intimidation purposes against opponents, suggesting they don't hunt other Pokemon at all. Even the Hisuian form is said to eat, quote-unquote, souls, but this is no different than Duskmire, as it doesn't actually eat the soul, but instead works as a purifying passageway to guide souls to a peaceful afterlife. Nummel's line states no diet and is based on camels who are herbivores. What's fun about this line and the Rhyhorn line is that if you look at the route at the base of Mount Chimney, you will find that both Rhyhorn, Nummel, and their evolutions are found there with no Pokemon that would attack them often enough to cause enough pressure to evolve. But Rhyhorn are Rhino who would feed on the same foods as Nummel would in this environment specifically, meaning that the two Pokemon are causing pressure onto each other because they will both get aggressive and territorial over food and their territory, of course. And this causes them to evolve in the area. They even have similar movesets early on in levels and at the level that they are found in to really hit this interaction home. Mienfu's Ermine Self is another fighting type that specifically states it fights opponents and not prey while living in areas where it doesn't seem to hunt. So again, herbivores for fighting types, which we follow through with Meditite and Medicham, knowing they eat only one berry a week, and then when it evolves, one berry a month. Honestly, we are in the section where it's all humanoids that have shown no evidence of eating other Pokemon at all. Even Mr. Mime in the anime only eats potato chips and never has a plate of meat set in front of it, even when it sits at the table with Ash and Delia. It's fascinating. And even Charcadet is noted to just eat fatty berries in order to fuel its flames, but I will admit that Cerulege is stated to absorb life energy, but it goes to the energy of the swords and not Cerulege itself, likely meaning that it is just energy for fighting and not a form of predation technically. Again, not for metabolism. Diglett eats vegetables, despite moles being insectivores more than anything else to my knowledge. It also lives in tunnels created by Onyx. And the Nidoran lines are also very fascinating because they are based, first and foremost, on rabbits, and the males are incredibly protective of the females as it listens for predators, while the females use their better noses to find food for the two of them. And as they evolve, they just become stronger, but once Nidoran finds, which it is actively hunting for, a moonstone to evolve, it changes dramatically to become a creature that will fight for mates and will hunt down and crush the bodies of other Pokemon for consumption, down to the bones. As such, Nidoking is the only one that we do not find here of its line. Cubone's line states no diet or prey, just that they become very aggressive towards anyone who might be a threat, while being very communal in the Alola region, as it becomes friends with those that would have helped it stay alive and evolve. There's genuinely no other reasoning here as to why I have it here, but I would argue that it is most fitting thematically for the Cubone line to be herbivores. After all, it would be really messed up if an orphan made orphans of other Pokemon after experiencing an emotional pain so deep. Wishmer's line only states that Loudred will stamp its feet to build power, which we are assuming is separate from energy for metabolism. They are also different from the Jigglypuff line, as they are noted to have strong muscles to scream as the way that they do, and they often live in solitude in caves, so we're going to assume they're herbivores, maybe Chemotrophs, maybe they're just scraping those blunt teeth on the ground and just horrible sounds coming out from them. There's not really strong evidence to put them anywhere. Dunsparce is scared of everything, while the Dunsparce is noted to be gentle and carry Pokemon to safety while scaring away opponents and intruders that come into its nest. No diet otherwise stated, but they are based on the Tsuchinoko, and those were eating like mushrooms and drinking alcohol and partying it up, so I'm just gonna say the Dunsparce is eating mushrooms. Maybe runts. Shieldon and Amoris line are pretty directly noted to be herbivores. Wynonna and Wobbuffet are strictly stated to never attack another Pokemon first, or anyone or anything first, and they just enjoy fruit. And Tropius literally only eats a singular fruit so much that it begins growing the fruit on its body. You are what you eat. And that's why cannibals are the most human of us all. Anywho, it is a monster and grass egg group born Pokemon, and most, if not all, dinosaur Pokemon are in the monster egg group, interestingly enough. So it's definitely part meat dinosaur, part plant. Maybe it's like a Pikmin, it's like an ambulatory plant. Seedot is here because it's technically an herbivore, but it's parasitic as it draws nutrients from other trees until it's too heavy to hang and then falls off. There is no noted specific tree that they grow from, but it'd be really cool to find out there's a giant shift tree out there. Lombre competes with birds for food while still using the lily pad for energy, and based on its appearance, habits, and location, I would argue that it is still simply an herbivore, or is an herbivore. Krogunk is one that could be argued that they do eat insects, but they are noted to only fight when they absolutely have to, while also seeming to not put pressure on other Pokemon within the environments that they exist in. So I don't think they're attacking anyone at all, but if you want to go based off of their real-life inspiration, poison dart frogs, then sure, say that they eat insects. And our final subsection before we get to the special Pokemon, as we have 3 tadpoles. Tadpoles in the real world, and even in Pokemon, seem to all subsist on pond scum, moss, not really seaweed in the real world, but a more herbivorous diet. But Tadpole will also go in the sky to get struck by lightning for general, probably fighting energy, so there's that. Meanwhile, Pincurchin is noted to eat seaweed, Binacle is also noted to only eat seaweed, and then Crabrawler line feeds upon berries while also climbing up trees for higher vantage points, despite it being a crab and crabs typically being opportunistic omnivores to my knowledge. As a side, Barnacle is actually really cool because they're based on gooseneck barnacles, and barnacles are in the same family as crustaceans. So while I won't have it noted, or at least visually shown on the diagram, because Pokemon themselves does not state it directly, we can state that any Pokemon that eats crustaceans may in fact eat Binacle. Honestly, there's a lot of Pokemon as well that would eat our tadpoles or bugs, these often being our bird Pokemon, but again, it is not directly stated, so I refrain from drawing the direct connecting lines between them unless Pokemon themselves state it. You're smart. I know you can put things together without me saying it, so I won't. To finish our herbivores, we move to the center to find a strange mix of Pokemon. Pheromosa is the cleanest cockroach on this side of the universe and lives in the Ultra Desert. There were no other forms of life shown there, but it does release pheromones, likely meaning that there are others like her, if not her exact species, of course. I'd be willing to argue that she'd be the exact opposite and far from a Detrivore as possible, and maybe even the cleanest eating herbivore possible. If Manaphy and Phione eat, they are absolutely not eating other Pokemon despite their inspirations of the really cool Sea Angel. This is because they have the move Heart Swap, which is basically the ability to have you see life in another person's eyes and feel compassionate without fail. So I'd argue that they aren't eating other Pokemon, but might be herbivores if they eat at all. As a side, Manaphy is also often described as the prince or princess of the sea, depending on the game or anime, and sea angels do change gender as they get older. This likely means that Phione starts off as male or female, then doesn't evolve but simply ages into Manaphy. Celebi is our adorable little onion fairy that enjoys berries, as shown on multiple occasions. Glacier is noted only to eat its special carrots, and assuming Jesus Rabbit Calyrex does eat, then I'd assume that it would eat whatever flora it decides it wants that day, since it can literally cause growth and blooms in one hand and then the full harvest in the other hand, or some weird mix like that. Honestly, it may secretly have created the Dynafruit tree for that matter. And finally, I think it would be most fitting to have Mew as an herbivore. Think of it this way. Mew is the ancestor of all Pokemon and was created by Arceus. And yes, as a reminder, it is not the literal ancestor of every single Pokemon, considering there are Pokemon that have been man-made, or are born separately, or existed before Mew, and are naturally unrelated. But with Mew's creation, we could even consider itself and Mewtwo as a strange parallel to Adam and Eve, one created from a part of another. And something deep inside me would say that Mew would absolutely enjoy some delicious fruit. Otherwise, since it has every Pokemon in its arsenal, Mew could just photosynthesize as well, or generally be an autotroph through various means. Take your pick. As we move away from this group, it's a great time to talk about the weird Pokemon outside of the groups, or at least one of them, being Bulbasaur. It is truly both an autotroph and an herbivore in roughly equal amounts. So it made me feel wrong to put it in a group or another. Many of our other Pokemon feel as though they lean more towards one or another, but not Bubby here. It is stated its vines are long and strong enough to allow Bulbasaur to grab the branches of trees and pull itself up to reach berries. Bulbasaur can survive days without eating. As mentioned in the sleep style decks, Bulbasaur is known to sleep in sunny spots. This all may be because Bulbasaur's bulb is not fully matured, meaning that it can't be fully relied on, but it does help somehow. We are in our semi-finale with the Carnivores. Now, these creatures, they're the ones eating meat. That can be insects, fish, crustaceans, birds, mammals, or anything else that Pokemon creates that can be considered to have what I am saying is meat. Pokemon like Badoo are plants, but as stated with Pokemon such as Tropius, it is a monster plant by egg grouping standards, meaning that it likely has actual fleshy meat. This is a really tricky grouping, so I did my best to organize it accordingly. We begin with a Pokemon that is a blast from the past, being Tyrunt and Tyrantrum, and while they were kings of the prehistoric world as a T-Rex, they weren't everywhere, just like the real T-Rex, and they weren't where Amora could be found, meaning they just kind of ate whoever else they wanted that was near them. Cranidos and Rampardos would destroy entire forests while chasing after prey, and is noted to directly have fought Shieldon and Bastiodon. If this Pokemon won, they would eat the little Triceratops Pokemon. Honestly, I'm pretty sure they bash against each other's heads as directly stated by their information, so there's a chance that these Pachycephalosaurus Pokemon were bopping each other and eating each other as well. Glalie will freeze prey and eat them as it prefers its food to be frozen. This means it will even go after anything composed of ice, as it is directly noted to attack the Vanillite line as a source of food. Too bad its mega form, has a broken jaw, so it can't eat. Aerodactyl was the king of the skies, but has no stated diet, though I would not be surprised to find it eating some Archaeops in the past. In the meantime, Kabuto and Kabutops state no diet, but are inspired by horseshoe crabs and trilobites. This allows us to understand that they are likely eating plankton, worms, and anything else in the water with a hard shell, at least until Kabutops started chasing something onto the land. To follow are Lileep and Cradily, who primarily stuck to the water and would use their tentacles to attract fish towards them before grabbing the fish or any other prey with their tentacles and consuming them, or flat out dissolving them with gastric acid to make said consumption easier while you're still alive. Cradily will also clamber onto beaches and attack creatures there, and with them being inspired by predatory tunicates, we're gonna assume that they are pretty predatory. Cacnea and Cacturn aren't even real cactuses. They're some sort of creature wearing a cactus shell suit as a disguise and spend so much time in the desert that their blood turns into sand. Again, if you don't believe anything I'm saying, go look up their information. That is exactly how that's stated. I bring this up every single time I talk about them because I need to see what's hiding inside of those shells, just like I need to see plankton in the Pokemon world. Anyway, they do state that they wait for a creature to become weak before attacking, and more often than not, it seems like lizards and insects are high on that list of common prey when I look at their routes. Roserade is finally showing its face, as it lures prey with a sweet aroma. The more toxic its poison, the sweeter its aroma becomes. Each hand has different toxins, but both hands can jab with nearly deadly power. Roserade's right arm contains poisons that act faster, while its left arm contains poisons that act slower. Regardless, Roserade's poison can be life-threatening. So unlike its previous forms, it is actively hunting prey that it has attracted to it, and it's kind of cruel about it, or can choose to do so, which the prey it is likely eating is likely going to be Volbeat and Illumis, as at least within Hoenn and Sinnoh, they seem to have a cooperative nature with each other until an evolutionary stone ruins that. As every single route that you originally see them in, they are only found on the same routes that the others are found on. The whole Bellsprout line is pretty clear that if its prey of desire can fit into its mouth, it will eat said prey no matter how large. And if it is too large, then Weepinbell will use its leaves, dice it up, and make that digestion easier, while Victreebel is directly stated to eat insects and even large animals on occasion. Red in the Pokemon Adventures manga almost got eaten by one. You should go check out my Pokemon Adventures manga coverage, by the way. It's great narration. Our Rafflesia flowers that go against the norm finally arrive as well, as again, their real-life inspirations do not consume prey. But both Gloom and Vileplume use their sweet sap or aroma to attract insects, if not more, and eat them up. Fungus and Amoonguss are weird, and I suppose you could put them in the Omnivore section, but when you have Pokemon that are specifically adapted to look like a Pokeball, you have a carnivore and you cannot change my mind. They are adapted to kill us. It is noted to lure in prey, but doesn't state any prey in specific. Another mushroom Pokemon is our Toedscool line, or rather the duo, that are pretty cool wood ear mushrooms. The uncool part is that Toedscruel is specified to be very dangerous and will eat by wrapping prey with its tentacles and sucking out their nutrients, which causes the prey pain. The only reason that they are here in the carnivore section is because it is absorbing nutrients from prey, otherwise it would have been with the Spiritrophs. Our water Pokemon often end up eating plankton or other fish, of course. This is the case for the Shellos line and the Ammonite line in particular, while Omastar is noted to prey upon prehistoric shelter. But don't worry, Caracosta evens things out and eats Omastar. One final interesting note is that Omastar is also stated to be a close relative of Octillery, and they do have similar enough eating habits on top of this relation. Shelter is a Pokemon that is very much involved with the ecosystem and its food chain. It is a distant relative of the Shellos line. It eats fish by luring them in with its tongue, and it will also consume Slowpoke tail, but of course also attached to them. Cloyster preys upon Slowpoke tails as well, but we never see them causing an evolution. And in return, modern predators of Shelter include Kingler, Rufflet, and Bruxish. Kingler is also a natural predator of Cloyster. When you have a Pokemon that's existed for so long, because Shelter has existed since prehistoric times, it makes sense that so many Pokemon would eat it, and it would eat so many Pokemon. I would even call it another keystone species Pokemon. Clauncher shoots down flying prey, meaning it's most likely eating bugs and maybe some birds. Tentacool's line eats anything that it can grab with its tentacles, going as far as decimating entire areas of their fish population. And to follow, we have the Inkay and Malamar, which will first hypnotize their prey with patterns very much similar to the cuttlefish, and then attack them for consumption. They don't state what the prey is, but when we look at squids, we get fish, crustaceans, and cephalopods, which I alluded to earlier. It means that just about anything that's a water dweller and not a mammal is on the hit list. But even that's wrong, as this Pokemon can float onto the land and will do so in order to hunt whatever it feels like, mammals included, most likely. Clobbopus states no diet, but Grappaloct will fight with Golisopod, and whoever wins is turned into prey. We could assume it just has a diet of an octopus, meaning we include gastropods like snails and sea slugs, bivalves like clams and mussels, crustaceans like lobsters and crabs, and then fish. while once again knowing that they can walk onto land and punch whatever they set their eyes on. Anorith and Almaldo state no diet, but Anorith being the Anomalocaris means that it was likely hunting down prey and breaking shells while also having fun eating plankton as it floated through the ancient waters. And despite evolving legs, according to the Pokédex, Armaldo would still just dive into the ocean to hunt down prey. And I'm not even going to talk about our Galar fossils too much. I love them, but they're all fake. None of them actually existed and were the product of careless work that is meant to represent the dinosaur bone wars, where people were putting together fossils incorrectly just to say they identified more dinosaurs than another person. I mean, literally, the scientist you go to, her name is Careless. It's one big joke. Really cool, but one big joke. As such, the Galar fossils are technically not even part of the food chain, though I will note all of the pieces, to my knowledge, were carnivores with exception to the stegosaur parts. Carnivorous bugs of the Pokemon world are up next, and oh boy are they scary. Surskit and Masquerain state no diet, but since they come from a water strider and whatever Masquerain is, because it's not really a bug in the real world, those little critters will eat any bug that they come across that's smaller than them, even other water striders, though some may consume algae and dead insects, so take its placement here with a grain of salt. Pineco and Fortress will actively wait for flying creatures to flit on by before quickly striking with such a speed, opening up and chomping down, that we have not once been able to see the inside of these Pokemon. Though it is noted that Cutiefly are Pineco's favorite prey in Alola, it bothers me that no one has just cracked one of these suckers open to see what's inside of them after they pass away. Venonat and Venomoth just eat bugs attracted to light, while they themselves are attracted to light, so they might be eating each other, or at least Venomoth might be eating Venonat. Pinsir will eat other Pokemon, and it doesn't seem to be limited in any capacity as long as they have meat, though it also will eat sap as a treat and fight with Heracross over said sap. The two of them ally together in Alola when Vikavolt are around and instead will fight the aggressive electric bug, though none of them seem to eat each other and just get really aggressive over sap. Carablast is literally a snail-eater beetle as it preys upon Shelmet. Gligar glides smoothly and silently through the air with its limbs extended and startles its prey and enemies by flying straight towards them. It attacks by clamping onto its enemy's face with its clawed hind legs and pincers, then jabbing with its poisonous stinger. Mind you, the real-life scorpion fly that it is based on is just as scary looking, but is otherwise harmless as it primarily prefers rotting fruits or insects. We get a bunch of our arachnids who are generally going to be opportunistic carnivores with the spare occasion of maybe eating some grasses, fruits, or nectar depending on the species in the real world. Tarantulas line has a rivalry with Scyther, which likely means to the winner goes the spoils, and Spinarak is a patient hunter. It can wait days for prey to become ensnared in its web. It senses what kind of prey has been caught by the vibrations in the web, and its preferred prey is Cutiefly. Poor thing is just at the bottom of the food chain. Once its prey is captured, a motionless Spinarak will wait until darkness falls. Just imagine being caught and just being forced to wait. Imagine getting caught in the morning and you wait until dark. Its poison is not very strong, but it's potent enough to weaken caught prey. Ariados is not any better as it gets a bit scary. When prey is captured, it is wrapped in thread and then attacked by fangs. Ariados then drinks the victim's bodily fluids at leisure. Sometimes it will instead release prey with a single thread attached. The thread is then followed to both the caught prey and its friends. Ugh. But when we do get into Joltik, it does consume electricity for energy, but not metabolic energy, it seems. It might attach to Pokemon such as Yamper for electric energy, but it does not prey upon the little corgi. In addition, it is often aided by its family of Galvantula, who prey upon small birds and even bats, according to what I've seen in the Pokemon official ecology book. And oh yeah, you bet I've seen that book, though I will note the most of it is fantastic illustrations with basic Pokédex information and some additional new information such as how fish move or bird wings work differently, which is pretty cool at least, but I digress. It's probably not something I'm going to fully cover with the channel because it is just Mostly information you can find in the Pokédex, including things like how Huntail moves its tail. Yanma states nothing about its diet, but dragonflies will eat bugs, arachnids, and even small minnows by spearing them with the horn that they have on their head, which is really sick. Yanmega is terrifying, on the other hand. It has very strong jaw power and bites apart its prey's heads while flying at high speed. Yanmega usually aims for the prey's most vulnerable spot, wasting no energy in the process. It is said to be an extremely violent Pokemon, usually requiring someone of incredible bravery to tame this aggressive bug. When Yanmega needs to rest, it flips its body over and finds a branch to rest on. Don't mind it being all cute after committing efficient murder so casually. The Scyther line as a whole is just deadly and aggressive, and with praying manti being ambush predators, we can understand how these Pokemon feed. The only thing I want to note is that Caesar can be found naturally in Alola with Komodo's totem fight, likely meaning that it actually lives peacefully with them and evolved since their metal scales fall off, allowing Scyther to take up those scales, mold it to its body, and evolve, which is dope. Scorpy ambushes prey by hiding in the sand. Drapion is the demon of the sands and will go on rampages, so it's gone from ambush predator to siege predator, while Dewpider and its evolution Araquanid will either drag prey into the water to drown, headbutt prey with their bubbles to kill them, and Araquanid will even store excess food in its bubble. A casual 6-foot tall spider just running around. I'll let you figure out how scary that is. Spearow are found naturally in open habitats with warmer climates, mainly desolate wasteland and fields where it hunts for insects. Ekans is a natural predator of Spearow, and Spearow preys on Sun Kern. While Fearow expands its diet dramatically outside of the food chain, as I suspect it to be eating carrion on top of what we are told thanks to its features and inspirations. Its long neck and beak allow it to pluck prey from both land and water, and has even been known to steal from unwary humans. It will shoot upward and then dive down to catch prey. It will also catch tiny insects that hide underground and circle the ocean for fish. Pidgeotto is a powerful flyer capable of carrying prey several miles to its nest. It has amazing vision, which helps it locate preferred prey such as Execute and Magikarp. The Pokemon in the series episode Ash Catches a Pokemon depicts it preying on Caterpie, and Pidgeot seems to have the same diet but reinforces that it eats Magikarp, just really hammering it home. Volibee and Manabuzz go after any prey that is weakened by their environment while also primarily preying on Cubone. I also want to take a moment to introduce you to the bearded vulture, one of the coolest birds of all, who is red because it rubs dirt on its body from its habitat. That's all. Let's move on to Eiscue, who hunts in the water for prey. It is a penguin after all. And to follow, there's Hoot Hoot and Noctowl, who are owls, and those, to my knowledge, are typically obligate carnivores. Hoot Hoot is also noted specifically to prey upon Grubbin. Cramorant aims to eat fish, especially Arrokuda, but might accidentally grab a Pikachu. The weird thing about it is Cramorant doesn't stop trying to eat Pikachu. It just stares with a wide eye and continues to try and swallow the poor mouse until something prevents it from doing so, which is a little haunting, but that's nature, I guess. Magmar has a bad habit of unintentionally burning its prey to a crisp, while Magmortar has learned from these mistakes. From looking at their routes, they don't prey upon mineral Pokemon, but instead go after other non-plant Pokemon. They are likely doing this because they burn a lot of calories. I'll go see myself out. Check you later. Swoobat and Woobat also go against their real-life inspirations of the Honduran white bat, and instead of eating fruits, they go eat some insects. But hey, they might suction to you and leave a heart-shaped mark on you, which is said to be good luck. Realize that is the equivalent of this Pokemon leaving a hickey on someone's body, and I'm ever so slightly uncomfortable now. Hawlucha is a bird of prey, and despite being a fighting type, I can almost guarantee it is eating small mammals. Part of this is because its fighting typing comes secondary to its flying typing, which breaks our fighting types are herbivorous rules that I've set. Fletchinder has a flame sack in its belly. It hunts by igniting tall grass and swooping down on bug Pokemon that attempt to escape the blaze. Once captured, the prey is cooked before being consumed. Talonflame feeds on other bird Pokemon such as Wingull and Pikapek. It hunts by diving and attacking its prey with kicks before grasping them with its talons, doing a little rider kick, you know, ensuring that they have no time to escape from it. When it dives, it can reach speeds of 310 miles per hour or 500 kilometers an hour. It is powerful enough to be able to fly while carrying prey weighing more than 220 pounds, roughly 100 kilograms. To put that into context, they can pick me up. Even our largest eagles could only carry about 40 pounds or 18 kilograms at the highest currently recorded weight. And a lot of the time, if a bird is picking that up, they have to swoop. They have to use momentum. This puts a lot of Pokemon on this thing's radar and likely means it is near the top of the food chain for any area that it is in. Piplup states no diet, but it is a penguin. Skarmory doesn't say anything either, but it is very much similar to a carrion bird and some birds of prey, so I'm just gonna leave it as a carnivore at least. And then Bombardier uses the apron to gather food such as basculin and brings them to its nest. Bombardier also gathers various objects such as rocks in its apron, which it then drops from high places for fun. It particularly enjoys dropping objects that cause loud noises. It's like a little cartoon bird. Totodile's line are crocodiles. They will death roll anything that they can catch in their jaws. And along those lines, we have the Sandile line that starts off as ambush predators. I guess it technically is always an ambush predator either way. And then it eventually teams up with Flygon to catch prey together within sandstorms created by Flygon. And then they split the prey. So they're going to have similar diets. And you thought our avocado dragon was innocent. What's also funny though is that Sandile will prey upon Trapinch. But in the lentil region, Flygon is shown to feed their Trapinch babies. So I don't know, like, if just the Trapinch in other regions are just unwanted children, or what's going on there, or maybe it's just that, you know, Sandile and Trapinch don't get along, but if they all survive, Crocodile and Flygon get along for some weird reason. Tortuga is the only one to state a diet between its two forms, but it seems like they're implied to primarily be carnivores instead of a more omnivorous diet, as I would expect, since it is noted to eat Ammonite and Amistar. And on the same lines of carnivorous turtles, we have the snapping turtle that is the Chutul duo. Dreadnought captures prey and fights opponents by chomping down on them, though I will at least note that it could be sent to the omnivore section if it follows more traditional snapping turtle diets, as they are actually considered opportunistic omnivores. Again, I suppose both of the turtles here could theoretically be omnivores, so do with that what you will. Snakes, oh my dear Arceus, all the snakes are right here. They will eat whatever meat they can find in the Pokemon world, but we do have some scary examples for some of their prey. For example, Seviper and Zangoose will fight, and in fact, based on their real-life inspirations, they have very similar diets, which explains their quarreling. In addition, whoever loses the battle will be eaten by the other. And then to follow that, Seviper has also been shown hunting down Octillery in the Lentil region, which I would not imagine or could not imagine being a creature with no limbs trying to pick a fight with something that has 8 limbs. It's like, I don't know, a puppy trying to pick a fight with a tank. Ekans preys on eggs from Pidgey and Spearow nests, but will strike other prey from behind. By flicking its tongue out, it can detect danger and the scent of prey. Its jaw can detach to swallow large prey, but such a meal can make Ekans too heavy to move or become stuck and cause them to faint. And that's when all the birds come in or other mammals come in and boop, 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 you're dead. Arbok, vengeful in nature, will not give up a chase once it targets its prey or an opponent, no matter how far. It makes its home in grassy savannas and plains, but it can also be found in forest and desolate wastelands alongside its pre-evolved form Ekans. In the wild, it hunts smaller Pokemon such as Wooper, and also preys on Pidgey and Spearow eggs. When hunting, it uses the pattern on its hood to immobilize prey, then constricts them, and finally poisons the target to finish them off and eat them. A really cool thing that I want to talk about in the Pokemon Adventures Yellow arc is that Agatha is shown changing Arbok's patterning, allowing different effects to happen with Arbok, increasing its strength, increasing its speed, allowing it to be completely immune to all forms of toxin. It's really cool, and it's something I wish existed in the games. Sandaconda eats Durant eggs. Cyclizar is based on the anole, which has a diet mainly consisting of insects and other small invertebrates. And to follow this, we fall into the section of amphibians. This one is a hard toss-up for the most part, considering frogs, when fully grown, are typically completely carnivorous, and we don't get a lot of diets for our frogs, toads, and then Mudkip's line is separate from them, of course. But what we have confirmed is that Palpitoad does state that it will use its sticky tongue to catch bug Pokemon. Seismitoad is also terrifying because it will literally just grab you and just vibrate your brain until you die, and then it'll eat you. Okay, maybe it doesn't vibrate your brain, I'm being a little dramatic, but it will vibrate its prey until death. If not that, then it's going to go ahead and use its venom on you. Meanwhile, Mudkip's line, there's a number of potential inspirations. This includes, as others have posed, the axolotl, the mud puppy, the mud skipper, or even the gilled African lungfish, all of which are primarily carnivores, but the mud puppy will eat anything that falls into its mouth, while the lungfish will also eat some good greens. So take Mudkip as you will. Maybe it doesn't belong here, maybe it's an omnivore. Hard to really figure it out with a lot of our starter Pokemon. We've already made mention that moles, while they might destroy vegetable crops, they aren't eating them and are instead just digging their way through while eating up insects typically, or worms, which explains what's happening with the drillbird duo. To follow, unlike dogs, which are going to be more omnivorous, wolves, like our Electrike duo, are more like wolves, which would make them primarily carnivores. They'll still eat whatever they can when normal prey is scarce, of course, so keep that in mind. That can go for literally any Pokemon, any animal in the real world. Sentret is cared closely for by Furret, who is very quick and agile, which allows it to escape even when in the arms of a human, and that speed also allows it to catch prey such as Rattata. It tends to burrow under the ground of meadows and other temperate grasslands, and ferrets in the wild are often described as hyper carnivores. To follow, we get basically every single cat Pokemon, excluding Trubbish, since for some reason the Pokemon company sees Trubbish as a cat. I even managed to put Sneasel here before I realized that they considered Sneasel to be a cat. And to my understanding, all felines are obligate carnivores. Again though, if it doesn't have the prey, it will eat whatever it needs to for nutrition, but try to tell any of this to a house cat because they'll absolutely nibble on some of your favorite plants. Take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt because I just thought about it. I think there are studies out there that technically show cats aren't actually domesticated. They just kind of choose to be, kind of choose not to be. Someone out there in the comments fact check me because I've already done all this work and I'm too tired to look into that at this exact point. For more specific information, we know that Pyroar will not use its Flame Breath on prey as it does not prefer them to be cooked. The Purloin and Nickit line have rivalry with each other, so there's a chance that they might eat each other. Otherwise, their rivalry is just simply due to them both being thieves. We follow this with a slew of Meowth that exists. Seriously, I think Meowth has the second most forms in the world of Pokemon, right behind the Slowpoke line, though I like them both, so they get a pass. Either way, Meowth will quarrel with Murkrow over shiny objects. Alolan Meowth entered the wild when the monarchy fell, and so they became feral. And then Galarian Meowth has become tougher due to seafaring, so it's likely enjoying some seabirds and seafood. Despite everything, none of them have ever stated a direct diet from what I can find outside of what we see the Meowth actually eat in the anime. We've spoken on the Yungoos line, but I actually have grown a great appreciation for them based on their whole information. Yungoos has a voracious appetite and is always hungry, me too buddy, which in turn makes it more ferocious. Much of its body is dominated by its stomach and it is able to digest food quickly. Its strong teeth allow it to crush and consume the hardest of objects. This Pokemon stalks through its territory searching for food until it passes out from exhaustion. However, it is believed that Yungoos decides its territory based on safety, so that way it can collapse anywhere without fear. It is able to eat anything, but usually prefers a fresh hunt. They also have the stakeout ability, learning how to wait for their prey on routes that they would appear, and eventually it will evolve and gain the ability to wait long periods of time without having to worry about eating food as its evolution, Gumshoes. who hunts by patiently waiting along its prey's known travel routes and pouncing when the unsuspecting prey comes along. Due to its tenacious personality and ability to withstand intense hunger, it is able to wait for its prey for long periods without eating. Its favorite prey are the lowland forms of Rattata and Raticate, but since Gumshoes is diurnal, being a creature that is active during the day and sleeps at night, it rarely encounters them. It is also known to prey on Squavid, which does not provide Gumshoes much challenge. Once the sun does set, this Pokemon's stamina is depleted and will fall asleep where it stands. It is not originally from Alola and was brought over from its unknown native region to take care of Rattata outbreaks. This is also a great time for me to tell you and admit that I intend to cover all the true home regions of every Pokemon, and even reveal which ones are invasive species. Now, let me tell you, there are about 50 non-residents of the regions in which we find Pokemon for the first time. Moving on though, Heatmor has specifically adapted itself to be the only currently known creature to hunt Durant specifically and not their eggs, thanks to their incredibly hot tongue. Litten's line is yet another feline, and we finish this little subsection with the demons that are the Sneasel lines. Sneasel is noted to be smart, sneaky, and notoriously vicious, and blends well into the night in order to ambush their prey. They feed on eggs, such as those of Pidgey, that it steals from unattended nests. It first uses its claws to poke a hole in the egg, then slurps the contents out. It has been known to form pairs to hunt, one to lure away parents from the nest while the other steals their eggs. Although the Sneasel pair works together, they will also fight over their hunt among themselves. As a result of its egg-based diet, Sneasel are despised by breeders to the point where they try to drive away or eradicate them. Sneasel also preys on a lowland Sandshrew, but the Sandshrew's skin is so hard that it can cause Sneasel's claws to snap off. And to make this as clear as possible, Sneasel is the epitome, someone will correct me in the comments, of felines that have caused other creatures to go extinct and the perfect representation of a dark-type Pokemon. It is not inherently evil, it is just incredibly underhanded, sneaky, and intelligent as stated. They're capable of being absolute demons, and they know it. Hisu and Sneasel's sturdy and curved claws allow it to climb and travel through the walls of precipitous cliffs where it lives. The venom from the tips of its claws is capable of invading the nervous system of any prey it catches. That's weirdly specific. Like, I get it, it's poison and all that, but that's still, the way that it's worded makes it sound like the claws are so sharp and precise that they're going straight to your nervous system. It's kind of like the, what is it? I think it's the obsidian blades, which don't cut cells or something like that. They cut between cells. Weavile live in snow-covered areas and are notorious predators. They're famed for their speed and agility, and also known for its intelligence and cunning nature, thanks to its brain having developed as it evolves from Sneasel. A scratch from their sharp claws can cause frostbite. They travel in packs of 4 or 5, with one acting as the leader, and they hunt for prey such as a lowland Sandshrew, a lowland Vulpix, and species as large as Mamoswine. Then divide up the prey amongst themselves. Weavile can communicate with each other by carving patterns into trees, ice, and boulders, with over 500 distinct signs recorded. They have advanced pack tactics, everyone. They're basically the super hyenas of the Pokemon world, but as a cat. They also remind me of Cusco, especially with their shiny, so, you know, that's a little fun thing, at least for this dark Pokemon. Now in Hisui, their Sneasel will instead not be as spiteful and instead become Sneaselure, the result of it adapting to life on cliffsides in the frozen highlands of Hisui. Despite its lanky build, it possesses great strength owing to its vicious claws. Due to its severe poison and deadly physical power, no other Pokemon species could defeat Sneasler in its habitat. Using its claws, it is capable of climbing up walls and cliffs with ease. Unlike its counterpart, Weavile, it prefers to be alone instead of living in packs. In other words, Sneasler is claimed to be at the top of the food chain wherever it resides. Poniard's line is a little bit terrifying, as when hunting, Poniard immobilizes prey by repeated stabbing with its blades after clinging onto them, and then clings its arms together afterwards. It's like a victory screech, you know? They all answer to Bisharp, who fights other Bisharp to become the alpha of the pack. The loser of these fights is cast out. It is notably pitiless, having no expression when finishing off prey, and is also said to be using underhanded tactics during its battles. When hunting, the poniard allow the leader Bisharp to perform the finishing blow. They will compete with Fracture over sharpening stones, and only the strongest of the strong Bisharp will then become King Gambit. And time for our Field Water Egg Group Pokemon, Buizel, whose yellow collar is a flotation sac that can be inflated when it inhales. By doing so, it keeps its face above water to watch for prey and survey its surroundings. Conversely, it can deflate its sac in order to dive. Its tails can spin to act as a propeller, allowing it to swim and slice through obstacles like seaweed. Now, Floatzel, its evolution, can swim faster and control its flotation sac better now as a result of constantly chasing prey. Pair this with it often being found near fishing hamlets and it being an otter, and we know its diet consists of sea urchins, crabs, mussels, clams, fish, snails, and other gastropods. Thank you, Sea Otter Foundation and Trust. And I gotta say, this is really exemplified when we find it in Sinnoh for the first time on the same route as Shellos, who it has adapted to repel Buizel attacks with its purple goop that it releases. Spheel's line is actually a bit scary because Spheal itself is the scout, and when it finds prey while drifting at sea, it'll inform Walrein leaders of its herd on where to find the prey. Meanwhile, Celio dives underwater to hunt for prey 5 times a day, and it searches for the prey by its scent. Finally, the top of the top Walrein can be found in herds of 20 to 30 individuals, which are fiercely protected by the leader. The leader is willing to give up its life in order to protect the herd, and of course, when they all have food together, they clap all cutely. But imagine being prey that is dragged into a stadium of your predators, clapping away happily as you are dragged to your inescapable demise. Haunting, isn't it? Seal hunts for prey under sheets of ice in the late day and evening hours. Meanwhile, Dugong sleeps on bitterly cold ice or under shallow water during the day. However, at night, when the temperature drops, it becomes a hunter and searches for prey such as Wishy-Washy. Following a meal, it sunbathes on the beach. This raises its body temperature and aids in digestion, which, yeah, scientifically, yeah. Wimmer swims with its mouth open and eats tons of food a day, such as Wishy-Washy. It's also said to be natural prey of not only Delmise, as previously stated, but also Sharpedo. And as a fun extra bit of information, massive whales in real life might be aiming to eat shrimp, depending on which ones you're talking about, or just simply fish and shrimp or whatever falls in their mouth. But every so often, they might end up eating a seagull, which is somehow incredibly hilarious to me. Like, especially when I saw it while watching a documentary. There's just something weirdly funny about it because it's not expecting to eat the seagull. I'm not expecting it to eat the seagull. Everyone's surprised and you get a free extra meal. Mantyke's Duo states nothing about eating anything at all, but Remoraid... I'm sorry, I'm still laughing about the whales because I just imagine the seagull's like the 6th chicken nugget in your... or the 5th chicken nugget in your 4-piece of chicken nuggets. I'm sorry. Mantyke's Duo states nothing about eating anything at all, but Remoraid is eating scraps from this Pokemon, so it has to eat something. And considering it's inspired by the manta ray, manta rays are filter feeders, which means that they consume large quantities of tiny organisms such as plankton and small fish. Their feeding habits are unique and interesting to observe, as manta rays have specialized structure in their mouths called the cephalic lobes, which they use to funnel water into their mouths. As they swim, water passes through their gills, and the plankton and other small organisms are trapped in their gill rakers. This filter feeding method allows manta rays to consume large amounts of food without expending too much energy. And yes, all of this does line up with this Pokemon's routes and habits. Once again, since it often soars through the air, I would not be surprised to find out that it might eat a bird or two, especially when it's being served on an Alola. Just a little fast food, if you would. Imagine you on a Mantine doing a triple roll, and middle of that, it's just a slow-mo of it opening its mouth, catching a Wingull, and then continuing the roll as you land on the wave perfectly. Staryu just kind of lets itself be eaten as long as nobody messes with its core, Luminion being one of the known Pokemon to do so, meaning there's a good chance anything that exists on the seafloor will eat Staryu. And then when it does evolve, instead of getting revenge, it just spins through, swimming in the oceans, eating plankton as a Starmie. Aracuda is noted to be eaten by Wattrel, while Barrascuda will launch itself out of the water to eat Wingull. I feel so bad, but it's still so funny. But yes, this is a real world thing that some fish do, and it's really, really cool. But they will apparently also compete with Finizen in the water for food. You know, the dolphin. More fun facts, by the way, Barracuda in real life are nowhere near as actually aggressive as they have been made out to be. Thank you, Finding Nemo. In fact, I've been informed that they just have incredibly poor eyesight and tend to mistake creatures for food. Thank you, college professor. Finian does absorb sunlight, but this seems to be in order for it to shine and glow better, as it is considered the butterfly of the sea, and this butterfly, once again, is eaten by Wingull when it flies out of the water. I'm just now starting to realize just how involved Wingull is in the ecosystem. Keystone species, baby! Luminian walks along the seafloor using the fins on its chest. This behavior helps it to avoid predators, and it attracts prey by flashing the patterning on its wing-like fins. Although, this also attracts ferocious fish Pokemon that Luminian itself is prey to. It typically competes with Lantern for food, such as Staryu and Starmie. Wiglet is afraid of Veluza and will hide from it, while Wugtrio makes its habitat on coastlines and hides within its rock when spotted by humans. It is considered a particularly aggressive Pokemon species, wrapping its 3 bodies around prey and dragging them down to its lair. And the best part about them, these things are real. They're literally garden eels from the real world, and they wave about in the same exact fashion as Wiglet. To explain further, garden eels eat plankton, fish eggs, and crustaceans such as amphipods and copepods. They feed on floating zooplankton brought to them by the water's current. In aquariums, they are frequently fed some types of shrimp, including ghost shrimp and brine shrimp, as well as freshwater ghost shrimp or small feeder fish. Garden eels anchor themselves to their burrows and emerge to feed on plankton that passes by. Clamperl, as we move on, is the bane of my existence as the really cool but weird eel egg that it is. It is also directly stated to be carnivorous, clamping down on prey without letting go until the prey stops moving. And Huntail doesn't say anything new, but here's a gif of it trying to eat a Vaporeon in the anime. So we can assume if something falls into the water, Huntail is gonna try and eat it with maximum aggression. Remoraid tends to travel by attaching to Mantine's fins or in large groups of its own kind. It attaches itself by using its dorsal fin, which acts like a suction pad. When attached to a Mantine, it feeds on whatever the Mantine leaves behind, but will fight alongside it as well. A school of Remoraid is often seen working together and traveling with a Mantike, helping it achieve its evolution into Mantine. Of course, it is noted to shoot down Burmy from their branches and eat them, and this is likely because it is partially inspired by the Archerfish, which is just stunning in its capabilities. Octillery's ink obscures vision and contains substances that dulls predators' sense of smell. Octillery also uses this ink on its prey before its suction cups hold the prey tightly. And we've already talked about what octopi will eat, so we can move forward to Alomomola. Now, you would not expect this Pokemon to be here, but despite it being a Pokemon that heals others, it is a predator. This is because by looking at Unova, we can find some fun areas where only it and Frillish will be found. And while Frillish will prey upon it, as shown in Pokemon Snap, Alomomola is a great Mola Mola sunfish, a creature that somehow manages to survive despite being incapable of closing its mouth or controlling its buoyancy, to the point where if it tips over, it just becomes a living dinner plate cesspool of parasites for other creatures such as birds. And no other creature really actually hunts it down. I think sea lions or seals or something like to rip off its fins and use them as frisbees for fun. It's ridiculous. Honestly, speaking on how they survive, it's because they lay literal millions upon millions of eggs. I think it's between 2 to 3 million. I'm not even remotely kidding. But these dinner plates dropped by God have the occasional luck of jellyfish floating into their mouths for a meal. Otherwise, that's it. And as such, with this inspiration in mind, this very special location for Alomomola and Frillish as well, we can safely assume that they will eat jellyfish Pokemon. To solidify this further, Alomomola has the Regenerator ability while also being covered in a mucus that heals wounds. This is perfect against the sting of a jellyfish, assuming that, the jellyfish don't get a jump on them and completely wrap around them and then, drag them to their doom. Luvdisc is another Pokemon that is eaten by Pelipper, but otherwise we have to consider its inspiration, being the discus fish as one of those inspirations, whose diet includes aquatic insects, invertebrates, and plankton. Alternatively, they share the kissing habit from the inspiration of the Kissingurami, which is stated, Kissingurami are mid-water omnivores that primarily feed on benthic algae, aquatic plants, and insects. They use their gill rakers to filter plankton and rasp algae from stones and other surfaces. So take your pick on what it could be, because it's not really directly shown or hinted at on what it eats, so it could be a carnivore or it can be an omnivore. Either way, it's consuming plankton at the very least. Corsola is coral, who are filter feeders. Stunfisk and its Galarian form will try to capture anything that steps on them and eat them. Relicanth is a filter feeder that is directly stated to be feeding on microscopic organisms, my goodness, that it sucks up with its toothless mouth, and Veluza's main method of hunting comes from its ability to shed its own flesh, via its signature move, Fillet Away. This boosts its offensive prowess and psychic power, as well as its agility, giving it an easier time when chasing down and tearing apart prey. It can grow back its lost flesh due to its excellent regenerative capabilities. The discarded flesh has a mild yet delicious flavor. So not only does this Pokemon literally rip its own skin off, but humanity sat down and said, let's just all pick this up and eat it, and found it to be delicious. Can you imagine just sitting on a beach, catching your breath after escaping a Veluza attack and shrugging before peeling it off the surface of the water, the skin that's left behind? Let's be real, I'd be that person. I'm too curious for my own good. Melodic states no diet, but it is an oarfish and often recognized to be an incredibly powerful one at that. Their diet is stated to mostly consist of krill. Carvana and Sharpedo are movie piranhas and sharks, being the extreme version of these fish that are incredibly rare, as they will rip apart anything and everything that they see that has meat. Carvana mercilessly swarm any intruder and prey that invades their territory, but they become timid when alone. It only attacks when in a group of 5 or more, becoming instantly vicious. They are drawn towards the scent of blood and live in rivers that course through jungles, as well as temperate regions. Each Carvana school has its own territory and competes with Basculin for food, and I would not be surprised if those two fish ate each other. Meanwhile, Sharpedo is known to prey on Wailmer, particularly small ones. It also preys on other water-type Pokemon, such as Finian, Luminian, Lantern, and Squirtle. I know that is the only entry in all of Pokemon that directly states that any Pokemon eats a starter Pokemon, which is wild, as we've kind of come to learn to some capacity that starter Pokemon are essentially endangered species, or at least foreign to whatever regions that they exist in. I think we know who may have helped push Squirtle to becoming a rarer species. Tynamo states no diet, but Electric is directly stated that it is a vigorous carnivore and has a good appetite. So great for grandmothers everywhere. Oh, put it up a plate in front of this eel. Upon spawning prey, it immediately coils around it and shocks it, using its electricity-generating organs to paralyze it before eating it. It dwells in caves and marine environments, and then to make matters worse, Electros lives in the ocean, but it crawls ashore, using its arms in order to hunt. It latches onto its prey with its sucker mouth and shocks them with electricity from its fangs before dragging them as it returns to the ocean. Water Pokemon are horrifying, and they don't just stick to the water. And the older I get, the more I realize just how scary water in the real world is as well, just from, just sparse extra readings that I don't even always talk about in my videos. Basculin is an incredibly invasive species that, long story short, eats anything and everything that it can, even each other, though the white-striped one is said to actually be gentle. This has caused people in the Pokemon world to suspect the white-striped one to be an entirely separate species. Otherwise, when a school of Basculin appear in a lake, Pokemon other than Corphish and Crawdons flee, though I'm unsure if they're willing to eat these crawfish Pokemon, or I don't know. I really feel like they will eat whatever they can. It's like bobcats and bears. Bobcats are technically higher on the food chain because bears will just walk away from a bobcat. They're just not worth the energy. Baskin has often also been referred to as the thug of the lake or river, and uses its jaws, which are strong enough to leave bite marks on iron sheets and devour everything in its way. Oh, there's our clarification, I'm sorry. However, despite their fierce reputation, they become prey to stronger organisms such as bombardier and dodonzo. And Basque Legion doesn't seem to state a diet, but I imagine it's kind of the same, but with bigger creatures added in. Vaporeon is directly stated to ambush fish Pokemon by just becoming water itself, which is a horrifying concept. This is more than camouflage. This is like watching a lion appear out of thin air 5 feet in front of you because it literally became the air that you breathe. It could have been inside you for all you know. It could have killed you from the inside. Vaporeon, bloodbending. Popplio's line are sea lions, which are mainly going to feed on fish and cephalopods. Lapras has been known to decimate fish populations in the modern age, likely because it has no modern-day predators. And as a reminder, Fitizen competes with Barraskewda for food and is also itself preyed upon by Dragalge. Bruxish buries itself on the sea floor, leaving only the growth on its head exposed. By emitting a low level of psychic power, it serves as a radar to detect prey. Additionally, the protuberance can emit a strong psychic power. Opponents bathed in this power are stricken with terrible headaches and fall unconscious. Its prey includes Shelder and Marini, which are ground into mush and eaten. Toxapex is a rival of Bruxish in warm ocean currents. And again, I feel like Bruxish would probably be, again, that bobcat. Most creatures stay away from it, and that's why they use Bruxish on the beaches of Alola to deter other creatures from going near said beaches. To follow, we of course do get to talk about Marini and Toxapex, who are said to feed on Corsola in pretty much any place with exception to Galar, as they have not learned how delicious that they are. Probably because, you know, they're dead. And they are inspired by a crown of thorn starfish, an invasive and venomous echinoderm that has dismantled numerous reef ecosystems by preying on reef coral polyps. To finish our fish, we have Tatsugiri and Dodonzo, who are of course going to team up together. Although relatively weak, Tatsugiri is one of the most intelligent dragon Pokemon. It baits prey, such as bird Pokemon, by playing dead, and when its prey approaches, it then commands its partner, Dodonzo, to attack. The Dawn follows the orders of its Tatsugiri partner loyally and provides the Tatsugiri protection and shelter with its large mouth in exchange for a greater chance at catching prey. Basculin are one of the Pokemon that Dodonzo preys upon, and Dodonzo is stated to be a heavy eater. We reach the final section before our special Pokemon at the center, allowing us to talk about our dragons. Trapinch will eat anything that falls into its pit, but technically Vibrava, as well, is not a carnivore. As stated in its information, after causing the prey to faint, as a Spiritrophs, it spits stomach acid to melt its prey before consumption. It continues this eating process every day to help its wings grow. Vibrava calls the desert home and is also known to preserve its captured prey in the desert's hot sands. And of course, we've already spoken on Flygon. Bagon and Salamence don't really state anything regarding a diet, but we can easily assume they are carnivores since they often seem to live in areas with high cliffs and less vegetation. They're just a bit too preoccupied with jumping off cliffs in order to, gain its wish of flying, and then finally being able to fly and being really, really happy about it. Druddigon is known to be vicious and cunning. It warms its body by taking in sunlight with its wings, and if its body temperature lowers, it becomes immobile. It's like, it's cold-blooded, who cares? It has savage physical strength, and nimbly chases prey around its den, using its outstretched claws to catch them, or charging into them face first. Instead of making its own nest, it lives in caves and tunnels dug out by other Pokemon, such as Diglett, Dugtrio, Onix, and Excadrill. Pretty brutal to not only destroy your prey, but also take over their home, but we can assume that Druddigon does not eat Onix. Again, it's just kind of fighting whatever it wants in order to make it its home. Neither Trico nor Charmander's lines state anything about their diets, but Sceptile is the king of the jungle that does not photosynthesize and nobody can escape from, while Charizard is a big honking creature that will just burn down entire forests for fun. To finalize the Dragon Egg group, Jangmo-Oh's line are carnivores only denoted by their final evolution, Komodo, who states the following. Because it does not wish to fight weak foes, it clangs its scales together when it senses someone approaching. Weak or cowardly opponents will panic at this sound and flee immediately. Komodo also swings the scales on its tail to threaten any enemies it sees. Upon finishing off its prey, Komodo will let out a victory howl. Additionally, the metallic sounds made by its comrades celebrating can also be heard all around the area the group is in. So there's a very good chance that it shares its victory meal with the group, but now we move on to those that I would expect to be carnivores. Honestly, for Moltres and Zapdos, this is primarily due to their sharp beaks, which we could very much compare to Pharaoh. Even by this, we can even suspect that they are pecking away, potentially at carrion from time to time. And finally, I would suspect Lugia to be a carnivore due to it spending so much time in the deep sea, assuming that it is eating. And it isn't a Pokemon that can just go without food. It does have a child in the anime, and that child has to grow up to be pretty freaking big. Maybe you could say Lugia eats birds, but I feel that would be a bit wrong, a little bit taboo, considering, you know, it kind of lords over 3 birds. Then again, that's maybe how it keeps them in line. You know, step out of line and I will eat you. Now, this does remind me that we do have a couple of different Pokemon that we need to just kind of clean up that are floating outside of the food groups, such as Turtonator, who does hunt for prey, but also feeds on sulfur and other volcanic materials in roughly equal amounts. This diet, rich in explosive material, has contributed to a layer of explosive material in its shell. This diet also makes Turtonator's feces dangerously explosive. The feces can be put to many different uses, and in Pokemon adventures, they can be used as a makeshift landmine, exploding from a mere touch. When prey steps onto its shell, it strikes itself with its own tail to cause an explosion. The explosion is ignited by sparks from the spikes on its shell and released through the hole on its chest. And to anyone saying Pokemon all know toxic because they don't poop, this is one of the many examples that prove that wrong. I apologize, but that is a weird pet peeve of mine that people state all the time, oh, Pokemon don't poop, and that is blatantly incorrect. Rowlet is implied to photosynthesize and hunt for prey equally, and we can look at the rest of its line, and with them being owls and knowing their habits, we can say they'd be a weird, perfect mix between carnivores and autotrophs. And finally, Tangela has tasty but refreshing vines, but its line not only photosynthesizes, but actively tries to eat other Pokemon. It's just not very good at it, and it doesn't state what Pokemon it may hunt, but it doesn't seem to be picky as a plant. As such, this will lead to our final section of the video, the Omnivores. Plants and animals, baby! Omnivores are eating them all, and some of our Pokemon in this section go even further than a traditional omnivore, as they might even eat mountains and the seas themselves, being truly omnivores and putting that Omni right in there. So, welcome to the finale. How many times did you fall asleep during this video? How many days of work did it take you for you to get through this video? Tell me in the comments. But we begin with Lickitung. Sticky, smelly saliva coats its tongue, which causes a tingling sensation when touched and can cause rashes if not cleaned off. It is used for capturing prey, mainly bug-type Pokemon, reaching for berries, and exploring its environment, attacking, and even cleaning. Although the effectiveness of cleaning is kind of questionable, as its saliva leaves behind its smell. When capturing prey, Lickitung prefers swallowing them whole after paralyzing them with its tongue. Ugh. Gulpin and Swalot are the stomach Pokemon who literally eat anything and everything that comes their way. Same thing goes for Dusclops, as it opens itself up and absorbs literally everything in its vicinity. These are only some of the Pokemon, again, that really put Omni an omnivore, because the Ghastly line will even hunt other Pokemon by suffocating them with gas. They will eat poisonous fumes in the Pokemon Adventures manga as a delicacy, and then Gengar will flat out eat your soul or life energy in general. It's okay though. It's still one of my favorite boys after all. I mean, look at behind me. Even if its G-Max form makes me hear my loved ones from beyond the mortal coil and lures me in so that way I may never be seen again myself. But here's one that is undeniable that you are not going to expect. Chimecho is directly stated to be an omnivore. Allow me to explain, as I did when covering Sinnoh's ecology. It can be seen plucking berries with its tail while knocking out prey with its headache-inducing ringing. That is directly stated in its Pokédex. Now, looking at Route 211, Chingling is found at all times, so what could it be eating? Well, we could consider that it is a psychic type. In addition, we know it isn't eating people since its high-pitched cry can't be heard by us, so this would be an adaptation meant to take down other Pokemon and defend itself. It is a baby, so we might assume that it is currently herbivorous. But that is unlikely since most creatures need extra protein in order to grow from a young age, especially if they're going into a more omnivorous or carnivorous diet. I would like to bet that Chingling, being found at 15% on this route, is likely eating anything lower in population than it. That leaves us with Bronzor, Zubat, Machop, and Hoothoot. To support this, on the other side of the route where we encounter different Pokemon, we find the same Pokemon across the board, except instead of Machop, there's a larger population of Machoke. Instead of Hoothoot, there are only Noctowl, and there are no more Geodude. Instead, there are only Graveler. We know Machop and Geodude will train together as per info from Machop, so that could result in their evolution. But Hoothoot isn't eating anything here but Zubat, and they haven't evolved into Golbat. If we follow our guidelines of pressure creating evolution, then that means Chingling is eating Hoothoot, but not the other way around. And do you know what can mess with the ability of an owl to hunt in the pitch of pure darkness? Bells. Disrupting the faint sounds that they listen for, and even being distracted by their sudden shine, giving Chingling the perfect opportunity to strike. I will note that this potentially also does extend to bad Pokemon when necessary, such as Zubat, so have fun trying to look at the seemingly innocent Pokemon the same ever again. Crocodile is terrifying and directly states that it will drag any prey it wants deeper into the caves that it is found in to never be seen again. The Knackley line, more specifically its evolutions, do state that they will shoot salt at prey, drying and curing them. It will literally dehydrate you while you are alive, and that is by far one of the scariest deaths of them all. It's often found on routes with a number of other Pokemon, but most consistently with Honchkrow, Go-Go, Hawlucha, Caparaja, Lokix, and sometimes Hariyama. When removed from those environments, Skiddo seems to be around in the area instead of just its evolution. The funny thing about that is that goats also lick salt, so there is a chance that not only is this Pokemon hunting any of these Pokemon, but also being consumed for its salt if it doesn't drop enough behind it. Go with what your heart desires. Shelmet's duo are snails. They could theoretically be anywhere on these diagrams, but they do live in bogs or swamps, and I have no other reasoning there. Actually, not anywhere on the diagram. Omnivores, not eating at all. Herbivores, carnivores, snails are weird. They have a really wide range. Sizzlipede and Venipede's lines are not only said to be similar to each other, which I assume is different from Sizzlipede directly being stated to be related to Scorpy, which is weird, but they are both incredibly aggressive, attacking anything they think they can eat while also fighting each other on sight, and once more, to the victor goes the spoils. Cricketot's duo don't state a diet, but crickets have a largely varied diet depending on cricket and location. This can be smaller bugs, detritus, fruits, seeds, greens, you name it. Meanwhile, Beedrill directly states it flies at high speeds and attacks using the large venomous stingers on its forelegs and abdomen. It will then take the victims on its attacks back to its nest for food. And it nests in temperate forests and misty wooded areas, known to collect pollen, which Teddy Ursa combines with fruits to concoct honey. And don't be surprised if it eats a little Teddy Ursa from time to time based on all of that information. Vespiquen is really no different since it will attack and eat anything that dares to take honey from its hive without permission. To follow, there's Golisopod, who comes from a Detrivore and now eats live prey such as Grappaloct if it wins the fight, and it will do anything to win a fight. And we now have the remainder of our common birds, and it makes sense that we'd see them here considering their information. Murkrow's line states no diet, but they're super-powered crows, meaning they can actually try to hunt down rougher or tougher prey that have tougher hides, such as Baneri, because I did some research and it's weird, but like beaver's underside has a softer hide than rabbits do all around, and so crows might go after some rodents and stuff, but they won't go after like our bunnies and rabbits, or rabbits. Don't ever say bunnies. Bunnies aren't real. Only rabbits are real. Flamingo is aggressive and fights in flocks while being a flamingo who eats blue, green, and red algae, diatoms, larval and adult forms of small insects, crustacean, mollusks, and small fishes. It always feels weird when I say fishes, even though it's technically correct. Starly preys on small bug Pokemon and Cherubi's nutrient-rich second head, as depicted in the Lonely Snover, and has also been seen consuming the acorn-like berries grown on the bushes of Grotto. Staravia continues hunting bugs, and Staraptor can be highly aggressive, persistently attacking even larger foes in spite of illness or injury, so nothing is technically off the food table if it thinks it can win. Wattrel and Kilowattrel are funny because not only will they eat Aracuda, but they are a mix of seagulls and frigate birds, and those seabirds will actually steal food from seagulls in the real world. This explains why we don't really see them in the same area, with exception to the West Paldean Sea, because Kilowattrel's duo has pushed Wingull out of the area. So we can easily state they're being just as omnivorous as Wingull, which, as a seagull, is often stated that it is much easier to list the things that seagulls won't eat. I will also note that Pelipper will carry Pokemon eggs, small Pokemon, and Pukumuku without eating them from time to time. Otherwise, there's no info I haven't already stated about them and their tendency to eat whatever they catch in their mouths while skimming the water. Tailow's line actually follows real swallows as they primarily eat insects, but Taillow kind of breaks it a little bit as it is confirmed to at least eat crops. They also do primarily target Wurmple, the two of them. Meanwhile, Delibird is directly stated to be an omnivore that shares its food on the mountains. And while Doduo's line does not state a diet, when we look at its many number of inspirations from the emu to the dodo and the ostrich, we find that we have likely some omnivorous tendencies. This goes as far as showing the Pokemon chasing a score bunny in Pokemon Snap, which is actually crazy. Once again, another starter Pokemon kind of being hunted down. Psyduck is a duck. It's gonna likely be omnivorous, especially as Golduck is noted to typically be seen swimming in lakes where it hunts fish. The prey is disabled, captured, and then brought to shore for consumption. Old tales claim Golduck punishes those who defile their rivers by dragging them in and taking them away. So respect nature and get dragged to the bottom of the water. Pidgey is omnivorous, likely only because it is so small and is noted to find food by stirring up a dust cloud that drives insect prey out into the ocean. Though it is not limited to bugs based on its dex entries, which might just mean it's eating Rattata as evidenced by routes it is on, but I'm willing to bet that until it evolves, it is taking what it can get. Fletchling will mercilessly peck at anything that enters its territory while commonly having territorial fights with Squawkabilly. Otherwise, it is stated that it is peaceful and doesn't fight, so we have some mixed messages, especially as it evolves into being more of a predator. It could just be a carnivore, but this is really a toss-up. One of the best birds, Rookity line, preys on Grubbin but will attack anything in its territory. The reason it is here is because its evolutions, like Corvisquire, do note other diets like Steenie, as we've mentioned, while Corviknight preys on Bunnelby and has violent territorial clashes with Skarmory. I would absolutely hate to hear that. The sheer amount of metal scraping onto each other that you'd be forced to listen to when they fight, horrible for the ears. More dogs, chicken are omnivores. Rufflet will crush berries for food on top of the prey we've already spoken about, while regular Braviary is known to aggressively attack anything. It's Hisuian Braviary that does the Pokemon equivalent of dynamite fishing. When it hunts, it sends out blood-curdling battle cries, which can be imbued with its psychic powers to generate shockwaves. It uses these shockwaves to stun prey living underwater in lakes, causing them to float to the surface before it grabs them with its talons and rips them apart. Directly stated. Mawile will also eat anything, and if it doesn't like the taste, then it will eat its prey or general target with its hair. What I love about it is that since it lives in caves, you would only see its body and not its hair, meaning that you would already be too close once you do see its hair to run away, and then you are chomped down. Azurill may only need the nutrient ball tail it has to evolve, but that doesn't mean that it has the fats it needs or the calories. So it would follow the habits of the rest of its line, which is noted to fish for food. Azumarill has highly developed hearing that allows it to hear distances even when it is underwater. By keeping still and listening closely, it can identify prey even in the wild, fast-moving rivers. They're mouse-rabbit Pokemon, so it gets a bit odd, and I'm inclined to keep them in omnivores, but you could shift them over to pure carnivores if you so wish. Emolga gathers and roasts a lot of food for itself, being berries or bug Pokemon, and once again, Plusle or Minun could be here or in pure herbivores. Hard toss-up with them being mice, but not following normal diets, and I believe they're still in the Fairy A group. It's, again, weird. Linoone is the only one of its entire line and its alternate forms to state a part of its diet. It can run up to 60 miles per hour, but it can only run in a straight line and has to stop before it can make a turn. Because of this behavior, it often fails to catch prey and struggles on roads that are curving or winding. though when it sees prey underwater in ponds, it leaps in and uses its razor-sharp claws to catch and take it down. But considering they all derive from the harsh conditions of Galar, as Galarian Zigzagoon came first, I am confident in stating they are opportunistic omnivores, very much like a raccoon would be, since they're more of a raccoon than they are a dog, even though they're the raccoon dog, which is a raccoon. Whatever. Either way, until they become a member of KISS, which makes it even weirder, but it's cool. Allow me to correct myself. A tanuki, a raccoon dog, is not a dog as well, but they are still a member of the canid family. They confuse me. Rattata's line are mentioned to eat literally anything they find edible, but the Alola version will at least only eat fresh food, so they're technically a cleaner species. And Alolan Raticate specifically is noted to likely have gotten fat because it ate a ton of sugary and fatty berries. Tandemaus is another mouse, and you gotta get the energy for more berry babies somehow. Meanwhile, we have all of our bears, or at least the remainder of them. Bears are omnivorous, eating lots of berries, some honey, some fish, some all mammals, you name it. Even the Stuffle does this, even though they have some red panda inspiration. Though Ursaring does fight with Primate for fruit, because of course everything fights with that ape for fruit. I do want to also note Blood Moon Ursalona is like super weird and outside of the food chain technically, because there should technically only be one, because that thing is a living corpse that is likely only alive because the Timeless Woods is literally timeless in secret and keeping everything frozen in time. Pancham looks up to Pangoro as a leader and tries to emulate its behavior in an effort to learn how to battle and hunt for its prey, but they obviously still eat leaves and bamboo on top of whatever prey they go after. Though, as we move on to Cubchoo's line, the only reason they are here and not in Carnivores is because their incredibly aggressive attitude and locations are more akin to them being more like the dangerous mix between a grizzly and a polar bear, known as the Growler or the Pizzly bear. Take your pick. But Pizzlies are omnivorous thanks to the mixing of the two bears, which allows them to better survive the climate change and have a wider array of food to eat. Hippowdon, as we move forward, will literally eat anything that falls in its mouth, but unlike real hippos, will actively hunt for prey. Otherwise, real hippos will absolutely still mess up anything that is in their territory, but are actually subsisting on aquatic plants primarily. Sandshrew spends much of its time hidden underground in deep burrows. It only emerges to lunge and drag in passing bug-type Pokemon, but Sandslash will cut berries down to them, while the Alolan forms are likely eating roots and mushrooms buried under the snow and ice primarily. As a side, when we look at routes that it exists on with Ekans, there is always a back and forth pressure they put on each other, as I'm confident, based on evidence, that Ekans eats Sandshrew, which causes pressure for it to evolve into Sandslash, who then eats Ekans, who evolves in return to try and eat Sandslash. If you don't believe me, check out the diets of the inspiration's least Pokemon, or my first ecology I completed back in Kanto. Moving on, Grafia eats bugs and berries. Stunky is an omnivorous skunk that is likely preying on Kricketot based on my findings, and skunks really love crickets. Darumaka's line are confusing, but are at minimum noted to have the Galarian form eat Snover berries. These two forms live in extreme conditions, so I would be surprised if these orangutans weren't opportunistic omnivores. I am near the finish line and I am stumbling on my words. Munchlax will eat anything that isn't fully rotten, while Snorlax will eat literally anything that comes near it. It doesn't even actually hunt, it just eats whatever is in reach and it can see, even if it is muck, which this is the only known Pokemon we are aware of that can and will eat muck. Because Garbodor doesn't. Garbodor will fight back, but it doesn't eat muck. To follow, we literally have every last dog and fox related Pokemon, including the rest of the Eevee line. The majority do not state anything about their diet or simply state that they do hunt prey with a ferocity like no other. For example, the coyote that is Lucario, or at least, Lucario's partially inspired by a coyote, hunts in packs. Houndoom will hit you with poisonous flames. My boy Mariana is an intelligent and effective hunter based mostly on brown hyenas, especially when we look at their shiny, meaning that they will eat or hunt just about anything. And what's fun about foxes is that they will gnaw on sticks and bark, which is exactly what Braxian's line does in order to fuel their flames. And since I did mention it, yes, Eevee is a mix between a fox, a dog, and a cat, primarily, and as such, it is omnivorous. This is exemplified when we know Jolteon hunts, Flareon will roast prey and berries, Umbreon will attack the throat of its prey, and Sylveon will literally calm you down with its ribbons before striking you when your guard is down as part of its hunting method. Salandit's line will eat anything but will eat plenty of bugs primarily. It has tried attacking Spinda, but it's noted to have difficulty doing so. Otherwise, the males don't evolve only because they give all of their food to Salazzle that has the most nutrition, meaning due to a lack of nutrients, the males just do not evolve. Simps. Kecleon is a lizard chameleon. Arcan's duo does hunt other Pokemon and eats berries. Fuecoco's line is another alligator, but Fuecoco specifically is noted to rush down any food it sees excitedly. I want to kind of see it waddle along real cutely. Noibat and Noivern absolutely love fruit to the point where they can be calmed down with good fruit, but they fly around on moonless nights and attack careless prey. Nothing can beat them in a battle in the dark, which extends to Hydreigon, who they will torment. This is also a little bit funny because Hydreigon is noted to have poor vision, meaning it likely struggles to see at night, and this is the only way for other Pokemon to get back at it. I will note chameleons, because I said it earlier, are generally primarily insectivores, but they might eat small amounts of vegetation as well. And our Kecleon doesn't seem to be putting the pressure on any Pokemon at all. So again, that's why, it's kind of here. Fracture will split prey in half to save it for later, while Haxorus will add mineral-rich soil to its diet in order to keep its tusks sharp. The Gible line are known to be incredibly predatory and eat anything that comes their way while collecting shiny Pokemon or items, such as our Carbink. And while Dragonair and Dragonite don't stay at a diet, it seems as though they do at least lower fish populations with their presence or are able to control them. I mean, come on, that's our adorable soft dragon. It's gotta be eating plenty of food of all kinds to be such a big soft boy or girl, while also saving Pokemon who are in danger all over the world. Horsey is closely cared for by its evolutions and feeds on insects and moss, gathered from rocks. Seadra catches its prey by spinning its body to create large whirlpools. When its prey is exhausted, it swallows the prey whole using its long snout, and Kingdra just causes massive whirlpools to drag anything it wants down while getting into fights with Dragonite because it's just making more work for our orange dragon. It's also likely because I believe the two of them represent two of the major forces from the journey to the west, so the parallels are extended through that myth. Gumi is stated to only eat leaves, but that's only because it's noted to be one of the weakest creatures we know of. Meanwhile, the second it evolves, it starts melting and absorbing anything that touches it, as it can't even tell friend from foe or prey. So given the opportunity, I can almost guarantee Gumi will eat anything or anyone. Dino's line are also literally omnivorous as it gets. Well, maybe not as omnivorous as it gets, considering what we will talk about soon, because they start out blind and just bite and eat anything they run into. This is very much directly stated, and once it becomes Hydreigon, if it doesn't eat it, it destroys it. Appletun line is another unique case because it is a dragon that releases acid into the apple it resides in, so that way the apple stays perfectly preserved. Give it a tart apple and the insides dissolve completely and it breaks apart as there's too much acid. Give it a sweet apple and it can make a better home for itself, and then give it a syrupy apple and there's so much sugar that they can house more of their own kind inside of the apple and eventually become a Hydra. Science, baby! Now, Flapple is noted to hunt bugs a lot. Appletun fights off Lechonk, but seems to primarily consume apples as per its entry, and we have no direct diet for the rest of them. It feels fair to assume they all prefer apples, but will eat insects that are attracted to them. And as a note, I'm 99% sure Lechonk is only eating Appletun for the apple body it has, and would not eat the actual Pokemon itself, since children are also noted to be eating the shell of this Pokemon without killing it. I assume, unless we have a Children of the Corn situation and Appletun needs to run very, very far away. The finish line is in sight as we only have 3 subcategories left. Barboat is eaten by birds but can use its whiskers to detect the location of its prey and to detect both smell and flavor, similar to human. And yes, real catfish are kind of like that as well. There are creatures that taste with their entire body within the real world, and that sounds horrid. Witchcash also just seems to eat anything that comes near it rather than trying to hunt. Wishy-Washy was likely not on your list of omnivores, but after careful consideration, it is a Pokemon that is both at the bottom and top of the food chain. When they are inexperienced, they are wimpy creatures eaten by literally any creature that wants a fishy meal. But if they survive long enough, they can form a school together and even scare away Wailord and Gyarados. So yeah, I'm sure they're eating whatever they want in their school form. Skrelp and Dragalge will eat lots of decaying kelp, but also attack anything that comes near them as they shoot acid at their prey while camouflaging themselves with other kelp. Poliwhirl is stuck between Tadpole and Full Frog while being noted to eat bugs, so I imagine it would be an omnivore. Again, fully grown frogs would typically be completely carnivorous, so take that with a grain of salt. And Wooper's line is noted to eat basically whatever falls into its mouth, and Quagsire in particular is a Japanese giant salamander in appearance and behavior down to the randomly bumping its head against things. So looking further into this, we find that Japanese giant salamanders will eat snakes, mammals smaller than them, pretty much anything at all. So similar to the Ekans and Sandshrew situation, we find Quagsire involved in eating them both or being eaten in return. Moving forward, Quillfish's line doesn't state a diet, but pufferfish will derive their poison from the food that they eat, which is exactly what Quillfish is mentioned to do. So both primarily eat algae and small invertebrates, and somehow that turns into a deadly toxin. We've already mentioned Krabby and Corefish's line, and we might as well add in Cloth because these Pokemon are all opportunistic omnivores. They will eat anything, including each other, in order to survive. Krabby goes as far as eating sand, but that's actually a mistake. It's eating the microorganisms in the sand and spitting them out, which is inspired by the sand bubbler crab in the real world. Slowpoke's line is primarily eating fish, but they will eat whatever they can get, assuming they can even remember to eat something before they just kind of starve to death or something eats its tail and the rest of their bodies. Though Galarian Slowking is terrifying as it is directly noted to test potions that it has no idea the effects of on weakened Pokemon. That goes against the Geneva Convention, sir. We've already talked about otters for Dewott, but they're noted to eat berries. Squirtle's line are turtles, which we have also talked about turtles, and Gyarados is also as omnivorous as it gets traditionally. And so we can finally close this all out with our special Pokemon. One of them is technically not an omnivore, but something very, very special. Brute Bonnet is ruthless and attacks everything while being part dinosaur, part fungus. Silvally is a chimera created by humanity, so I assume it would be designed to maybe even eat the Ultra Beast, which is insane to think about, but not impossible. Poipol's duo are just super hornets like Beedrill, and then Articuno and our Galarian birds are a very fun case. Articuno, likely being inspired by the white-throated magpie jay, would make it omnivorous, which we can tell from the short but sharper beak. To follow just by looking at the beaks of the Galar birds, we would originally expect them to be omnivores or carnivores, but thanks to them eating Dinafruit, they are now automatically technically omnivores. To follow Cubfu's line are bears, but they also really love their special honey. The legendary beasts would follow suit as felines or dogs. They're supposedly supposed to lean more towards dogs. Honestly, Raiku's the only one that is a cat in my eyes, unless we really want to say my baby Suicune is a leopard somehow. Either way, if they even eat, then they are likely omnivores, thanks to them also being rumored to be the revived evolutions, which might make Suicune a carnivore of the absolute least. They're a mess. More dogs with Zacian and Zamazenta. Roaring Moon literally attacks everything. Koraidon is a brutal beast that is known as the Winged King. I would assume it's meant to parallel, the major carnivore of the T-Rex, but expand on that diet. The Loyal Three are a monkey, a dog, and a pheasant, making them all omnivores, funnily enough. And Latios and Latias are super friendly, but they're kind of birds, while also spending a lot of time in the sky or by the water. I'd be willing to bet that they are eating fish and berries as their primary diet. And now, our last two. Mewtwo is a little bit of a stretch, I will admit, but it does live in a cave that has plenty of Pokemon inside of it. And with it being a non-technological organism created by humanity, I'm willing to bet that it has to eat, and it is eating whatever it needs to. Although if you want to consider other versions of Mewtwo, there is the chance that it doesn't truly need to eat at all, it just sleeps as it does in the manga. Your pick. But the Pokemon that is here as an omnivore is as true of an omnivore as it literally gets, and technically should be in a category of its own. Guzzlord is considered by the Pokemon world to be what they call a junkivore. This is because Guzzlord will eat truly, literally anything and everything. This includes the seas, the skies, and the mountains themselves. It can use its power to make anything float to its mouth, and unlike any other Pokemon that does eat, Guzzlord does not poop. Its body is theoretically perfect in design and just uses all the materials consumed to grow larger. Some even believe that it might be a corrupted Zygarde. But for more on that, you should check out my Iceberg series. But that's it. We've completed the entire Pokemon food chain, and I'm gonna be honest, it makes me a little emotional because this is super special to me in my heart as I tried making the food chain over a year ago. And while it was the thing that kickstarted YouTube as my primary job, there were definitely a massive slew of errors as I was not educated enough or thorough enough in researching about our world, and I was only including information from the Pokédex, so that limited the knowledge that I should have been using. I now sit here after completing so much research that this food chain is comfortably as accurate as I could possibly get it, with keeping in mind the Pokemon world and our own world. So, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this, please ensure that you do subscribe. Comments, fun facts about animals and plants, as I do read every comment, and the best way to freely support a channel is by commenting and giving watch time. If you would like to go the extra mile and support deep research like this that has science back behind it, become a member of the channel for as little as $3 a month here on YouTube or Patreon, as I completed the diagram, the research, thumbnail recording, and editing, and that takes a lot of time, but I loved doing it. If you do become a member on YouTube, you do get early access to videos, and on either one, you get behind the scenes info and get to hear your name shouted out at the end of every single video, which is exactly what we're gonna go do right now. Editing acrylic here. I didn't put in Raging Bolt. It's an herbivore. It'll be fixed in the final diagram. I'm not doing any other editing. See you in the funny shout out. Go there. Thank you to all of our members, starting with the Gods of Hope, Krill Fighter State 14, Heals for Life, Biggins Matty, Nick Buzzin, Summer, then all water champions, Andrew Mercy, East Coast, and Joshua Biggins Wilson, then all of our Knights of the Court, Crumple, Double, Shiny Gems, Sarah Brisboy, Moth Romance, Vanny Lemon, Fix My Nitrogen, Krill 14, Plow, Annie Stone, Allen, and Heals for Life, and then Blue Dalek and Warren Hemphill, then all of our Wanderers, Rainbow Rian, Lay, Sir Casual Ghoul, Hyrule Skibbity, I just should not have made me laugh, Ariana Scobie, Night Owl 707, Ezra Apollo, Cynical, Aid 23, Sorin, Ruthless Hauser, Evil 10, The Copper, Smith, J. Gill, Ruby, Salty and Kai, Lucky Charms, Bobs, Liz, Chris P. Buckin, Elendil Tenguesta, Elijah Tidwell, Tyrone Jones, Beware, Blaine, Gord, Switch, Micah 626 Gaming, T Baggins, Big Rosie 45, Domo Arigato, Zach Arrowwood, almost read that as Taco for some reason, Just Bad, Tone Shiner, Mom's Versetti, Bluest Gecko, Casablanca, Mercury, XV, Nicole Manassian, Alive R360, Matthew Kennedy, I lost my Mark Wolkowski, Electro Lucario, Nick, Kristen, Sandwich Boss, Sandwich Boss Emmy, Brian Griffin, Real Record Master 45, AD, John W, Luan M's, S9, Story, Will, Gibbo, Kevlar Dedon, Rexy Young, The Lawn, Estelle, Olivine Branch, Pisha, Salty Eggs, D, Sanguinus, TV, WDA, A Young, Young Script, Number 2, whatever this is, Vanessa Mario, Max Supreme, Desporting Emperor, Michael Stein, I lost my place, Alolan Figment, Lost My Stereo, Medical, TH73, Spurgalicious, Sydney House, Abdallah Alati, Tim Marco, Professor Bond, Mizora, Dakota Couch, Brad Sundimer, Drixel, Carl Jean, Hunter Ow, Hussein Kassam, Rebecca Connell, Yoon, Jabby W, Memento Mortem, Korn, Marshy, Edward Kasowski, Venica Fox, Nerdist, Freeberg, Hag, Eddie Cadabra, King Pie, Jack of the Frost, Rexus Ivy, and Addy C, Jacob Square, DJ Monk 23, Squidwater, Rice Smith, Gamer, Bad Dragon Knight, Just J, M, Star S, MD, oh my goodness, Japanese letters now, Hey Bell Yeet, Muse Art World, to Luminil, the Gwendolyn, Eastgander 072, Andrew Frost, Peak Anonymous, Summon Sloth, Knockanui, Ian Ray, Big and C9, Corner of the Comments, Sealy King, Betty Creeper, Theory-chan, Jojo, The Vorian Skies, Daniel Tracy, Garrett Hoffman, Rosif, Dylan Peters, Malachi Burkhardt, Carl Island, Heather Ross, and thank you all for being members of the channel. If you want to hear your name at the end of every single video, then go ahead and become a member for as little as $3 a month and help support the channel a great amount, and you support content just like this. So with that, as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't think I would do, don't think I would do. Please be nice to each other. I love you. See you next time. Bye.